Chapter 1008. If it were not for Wuming's words, everyone would not have been able to react. Because of Tiamat, after Gorgon left, everyone directly ignored Ereshkigal, the last figure of the three goddesses' alliance. When did you go to see Ereshkigal? Ishtar calmed down, as if she was somewhat dissatisfied with Ereshkigal. Gorgon's exit was the work of me and Ereshkigal. When Wuming said this, everyone understood why Gorgon left the north wall in confusion. It turned out that the two Sumer gods worked together to deal with Gorgon, but Ereshkigal should be restricted by the three goddesses' alliance. Quizzard suddenly said. Then Wuming nodded. Yes, because of this, Ereshkigal's divinity has almost completely disappeared, and the entire spirit base can only be forcibly maintained by the underworld. It has no combat power. Wuming's implication was to tell everyone that Ereshkigal was no longer a threat, and there was no need to treat her as an enemy. Those who died suddenly have also been resurrected. Presumably, Ereshkigal released their souls. Gilgamesh also interjected, proving that Ereshkigal was on the side of the humans. Really? How did that guy end up in such a sorry state? Ishtar complained proudly, but it was obvious that she was concerned about Ereshkigal. Seeing Ishtar's insincerity, Wuming could not help but smile. But don't worry, I've already given my divinity to Ereshkigal, and now she is fine, and I've also told her that if there is no other way, I will ask her for help, and she has agreed. Ishtar was shocked, and her hands could not help but relax. However, before she had time to express her surprise, someone spoke first. You gave all your divinity to Ereshkigal. Roman of Chaldea exclaimed through the projection. But how is this possible? I have never heard of divinity being given away. This king also wants to give his divinity to others. But unfortunately, this king is the king who separates the human from the gods, so he must have part of the divinity. Gilgamesh spoke to shut Roman's mouth. The implication was that it was not impossible to take out the divinity. Indeed, no god had ever said that divinity could not be given away, and no magician had ever proven whether divinity could be given away. No did not mean can't. Why do I feel that you are weird now? Quizzard said. Quizzard probably did not notice Wuming's divinity because of the disappearance of all his divinity in Tiamat's crisis. Merlin and Anna also looked at Wuming a few more times. Only Gadatsi and Matthew, who did not understand, were confused. That is it difficult to give away divinity? For Gadatsi, divinity was a strange thing, and it was like a consumable. In fact, Gadatsi was not wrong. Didn't Ereshkigal use her divinity to suppress Gorgon? It's troublesome to explain. Let's put it this way. You can understand that the divinity of a god is equivalent to the humanity of a human. Ishtar's analogy made Gadatsi and Matthew nod. But Ishtar is not accurate. After all, we gods belong to the mysterious side. Our divinity can be given away. Maybe in the eyes of humans, humanity cannot be given away, but our divinity can, but it's quite troublesome. There's no need to go into the details. You just have to remember that it's difficult to give away divinity, and you may not be able to get it back. Quizzard ended the topic. Ahem. Although Tiamat has awakened, she hasn't made any moves for the time being. Those Ramu and Kuru can't enter the Uruk, so we are safe for now. After the topic ended, Wuming led everyone back to the main topic. Tiamat hasn't made any moves, which is in line with our current situation. My trump card is still a few days away from being ready. In short, in these 2 days, we just have to improvise. Wuming put down the Funbaba in his arms and continued. Since Wuming said so, no one said anything since there was no other way. However, Roman, who was in Chaldea, had a strange expression, but there was no other way. The apocalyptic crisis could be solved just by waiting? That was too strange. Anyway, the meeting ended like this. In the end, it was Gilgamesh who forcibly drove everyone out of the throne room. Then, as if it was his daily routine, he began to deal with the government affairs on the clay tablet again. After all, the Uruk's problems were all handed over to Siduri, so they couldn't be properly dealt with. Gadatsi and Matthew were in a state of exhaustion. After leaving the Tower of God, They returned to the Chaldean embassy to sleep. Anna left alone, and no one knew where she went. Ishtar was in the limelight and received the worship of the humans. Quizzard was not as vulgar as Ishtar. She brought the leopard man to help build the temporary residence for the new population. Enkidu originally wanted to catch up with Gilgamesh, but when she knew that Gilgamesh had to deal with government affairs, she took the Finbaba somewhere. Anyway, Enkidu and Finbaba were good friends, so the two could catch up. In the end, Merlin took the initiative to find Wuming. In a room in the middle of the Tower of God, Merlin and Wuming came directly after they were driven out of the throne room. In front of the large windowless Uruk window, Wuming and Merlin stood side by side and looked at the busy scene in the Uruk city. Have the people from the North Wall arrived? Wuming suddenly asked. Leonidas, Noakamaru, and Musasobo Benkei, who were in charge of bringing up the rear, have arrived. There should be no humans outside the Uruk. If the previous evaluation of the Uruk was that almost all the humans of this era have gathered, then the current evaluation of the Uruk could be changed to almost all the humans of this era have gathered. All of this is thanks to you, Villo, Merlin said to Wuming in a rare tone, as if he was talking to a friend. However, Wuming smiled. It was indeed his credit to protect the Uruk, but it was also because of the spirit of the humans of this era. Gilgamesh had already told everyone that the world would usher in the end as early as 6 months ago. What did you see when you went to Eric Metropolis? Wuming did not talk to Merlin anymore and directly jumped to the main topic. The battle between the three-headed dragon and the creator dragon god. Merlin was not pretentious and bluntly answered Wuming's question. As expected, what was Wuming thinking? Wuming was, of course, Merlin saw the future from the roller seal of Eric Metropolis. In other words, the future changed by Wuming. Chapter 1009. I was shocked when I saw several futures with my clairvoyance. Now I can finally see a fixed future. Although Merlin, as a nightmare, did not have the colorful emotions of humans, Merlin liked to see happy endings. However, Merlin could not even see an accurate future, let alone happy endings. Instead, he saw several inaccurate futures. There was a future where Chaldea was completely destroyed and Mesopotamia was destroyed. There was a future where Chaldea did not arrive and only King Gilgamesh was left in Mesopotamia. There was even a future where this singularity did not exist at all. How could Merlin, who could not see an accurate future, not worry? However, Wuming spread his hands. There is no fixed and accurate future. What you see is the possible direction of a parallel world. As Wuming said, the future was not fixed. Even without Wuming as a variable, there would be many futures, which would lead to the birth of parallel worlds. However, with Wuming's existence as a singularity, its fate would inevitably change and deviate from the original future. This was certain. It was also because of Wuming's interference that Merlin could not see an accurate future, so it was understandable that he was worried. Perhaps Gilgamesh's clairvoyance could not see the future, so he anxiously asked Merlin to find the clay tablet of destiny to see what the future engraved on the tablet said. Things like the future should be experienced by oneself. If you know everything, then what's the point? Maybe the moment you see the future will change because of it. Wuming's implication was that he did not believe in the so-called future. Oh, if only King Gilgamesh could be as open-minded as you. You have to know that when he asked me to go out and find the clay tablet of destiny, it cost me my life. When the 11 magical beast commanders had appeared in the north, Merlin had relied on his illusion to explore the north with great difficulty. He had been very careful, afraid that he would be discovered and slaughtered by the magical beast commanders. It was at that time that Merlin happened to meet Anna, who had just been summoned to this singularity. If Merlin had discovered it a little later, perhaps Anna would have already died at the hands of the magical beast commander. Hey, you've been cooped up in the pagoda all day. It's time for you to come out and get some exercise. Wuming and Merlin once again laughed at his misfortune. You'd better spare me. Merlin found it troublesome to even recite an incantation, let alone go outside. He was a total shut-in. Forget it. Let's stop here. Merlin turned around and walked towards the door. I still have half a piece of butter cake in the Chaldean embassy. I might not be able to eat it in the future, so I have to enjoy it. Merlin, who had already guessed this outcome, even cast a magic spell on the butter cake to maintain its freshness. Hey, it's the end of the world. Are you going to eat cake to get through it? Wuming looked at Merlin with an annoyed expression. Oh, well anyway, with you here, I think the three-headed dragon will be enough to deal with Tiamat. Merlin, who had turned around, chuckled. No matter how stupid Merlin was, he knew that the three-headed dragon was Wuming's trump card. Although the three-headed dragon was one level lower than the god of creation, Tiamat, if it was Wuming's trump card, then there was no need to worry. Wuming must have done something to it. You trust me that much? Wuming couldn't help but smile. That's for sure. Aren't the others the same? Gadotsi and Matthew trusted Wuming because of his relationship with Wuming. Roman and Leonardo da Vinci trusted Wuming because he had helped Chaldea a lot on this path of humanity's destruction. Moreover, Wuming was powerful, and there was no other way but to rely on him. Gilgamesh trusted Wuming without a reason, and so did Enkidu. Ishtar trusted Wuming for similar reasons. The leopard man relied on his beastly instincts, while Anna followed the crowd to a certain extent. Quizzer did not completely trust him, but there was no other way. If worst came to worst, she would risk her life to attack Tiamat. Although she was a South American goddess, Quizzer was actually a goddess who came to South America from another planet. In a desperate situation, she might be able to kill Tiamat. On the other hand, Merlin trusted Wuming because of their old friendship. To be honest, when I found out that you didn't tell me about Leah's future, I wanted to slap you the next time we meet, Wuming joked. At first, Wuming was still very weak and could not change the ending of King Arthur. Even if he did change a part of it, it still ended with the fall of Arthur's dynasty. Merlin, who had the all-seeing eye, did not tell Wuming about it. Hey, you're the one who messed with my all-seeing eye, okay? Wuming understood what Merlin meant. It was because of him that Merlin could not see the future. Otherwise, Wuming would have slapped Merlin a long time ago. Merlin also thought that he could not see the future and thought that Artoria's future would be changed. Who would have thought that the end result would still be the same? Let's not talk about this anymore. Wuming shook his head and walked to Merlin, obviously wanting to leave with Merlin. You're not going to steal my butter cake, are you? What are you thinking? I have something to talk to Anna about, so I'll go to the Chaldean embassy with you. Wuming looked at Merlin with disdain. I see. Ahem, but if you want to eat butter cake, you can tell me. I'll give you a piece. After all, you're my best friend. I want all of it. Of course, it was a joke. However, Merlin seemed to take it seriously. He did not want to go back with Wuming. The two chatted as they left the tower and walked toward the Chaldean embassy not far away. When the two passed by an alley, Wuming suddenly stopped and turned his head to look at the alley. In the alley, there was an old man in tattered clothes leaning against the wall. The old man's eyes were covered by a tattered hood, and he looked like he was asleep. Merlin's eyes lit up when he saw the old man, and then he smiled. I'll go back and enjoy my butter cake first. In the end, only Wuming and the old man were left in the alley. Wuming walked into the alley and sat down face to face with the old man. What do you want from me? Wuming also opened the dragon nest dimension and took out a piece of meat pie and handed it to the old man. The old man looked up and stared at Wuming with eyes as sharp as an eagle's. After the old man stared at Wuming for a while, Wuming could not hold back anymore. Chapter 10:10. Seeing an old man like you, anyone would give you some food. And I'm not giving you alms. I'm here to exchange information with you. Interesting. The old man responded to Wuming with a deep voice. His voice was full of vigor, just like his eyes. He didn't look like a weak old man at all. Then I'll accept it, the old man said as he reached out and took the pie in Wuming's hand. By the way, this is beef filling. You're lucky. Wuming smiled mischievously. However, the old man didn't hesitate because of Wuming's words and calmly accepted Wuming's pie. Seeing that his prank didn't work, Wuming smacked his lips and began to talk business. You want to find Tiamat? There was no doubt that this old man was the first Hassan. In Wuming's view, the first Hassan only came to him for one thing, and that was Tiamat. The Primordial Mother is different from before. I can't get close. Wuming wasn't surprised by the first Hassan's words. After Wuming learned that Tiamat had the black soil, he didn't expect others to attack Tiamat. Sure enough, even the first Hassan couldn't get close to Tiamat. It was very likely that Tiamat's assimilation power was too strong. Forget it. You don't owe me a favor anyway. The first Hassan owed Gadatsi a favor, and the one who needed help was Gadatsi. It had nothing to do with Wuming. Even if it had something to do with Wuming, Wuming wouldn't care. You protect Tachika in the dark, I'll do the rest. That's my destiny. The first Hassan nodded. After this short exchange, Wuming left the alley. The first Hassan came to tell Wuming about Tiamat's unexpected situation. There wasn't much to say at the moment, so Wuming left. However, Wuming realized a problem from this. Tiamat was not weaker than Gidia. Even if she wasn't stronger, she was at least on par with Gidia. Wuming now already knew the identity of Gidia. It was the #1 beast of human evil, Beast Eye. Although Wuming had never seen Tiamat, according to the level of the god of creation, she shouldn't be lower than Gidia. Wuming already suspected. Wuming, I have to be a little more serious. After Wuming said that, Kalas on his head understood what Wuming meant. The trump card that was almost completed was accelerated by Kalas, who was in the route. By tomorrow, Wuming's trump card would be completed. After leaving the alley, Wuming walked back to the Chaldean embassy. The reason he came to this street was to find Anna to deal with some matters. Meeting the first Hassan was a surprise. The Chaldean embassy was not far from the alley where Wuming met the first Hassan. After Wuming walked out of the alley, it didn't take long for him to reach the Chaldean embassy. However, just as he walked to the entrance of the Chaldean embassy, Wuming heard Merlin scream. "Aw, Kezapalug, it's my fault. Don't kick me anymore." Suddenly, the scene of Fufu kicking Merlin's face appeared in Wuming's mind. Or perhaps, Merlin had already been kicked down, and Fufu continued to kick his face even more fiercely. Wuming lifted the curtain at the entrance and walked straight in. Sure enough, Merlin was lying on the ground, and Fufu was lying on Merlin's face, constantly poking Merlin's cheeks with his palms. There were several handprints of Fufu on Merlin's face. After seeing Wuming's arrival, Fufu immediately gave up on teaching Merlin a lesson. Like an agile little animal, he directly ran up the stairs and left Wuming's sight. Sure enough, Fufu was still afraid of Wuming as always. "What's wrong with you? You went to that little guy again." Wuming, who walked to Merlin's side, pulled Merlin up. Merlin smiled awkwardly. "Ah, my butter cake is gone," and Kezapalug happened to have traces of butter cake on his mouth. Next, Merlin didn't need a Wuming to know that Merlin must have thought that his treasure butter cake was eaten by Fufu, so he went to reason with Fufu, or maybe even wanted to teach Fufu a lesson. As a result, Merlin was taught a lesson by Fufu. "That's good. Don't eat it. What's Tiamat's rank?" Merlin definitely knew this question. Wuming's sudden question made Merlin stunned for a few seconds. The question of a beast was obviously at the level of the apocalypse. How could Wuming be as relaxed as asking about food and water? But Merlin still answered truthfully. "The second beast, Beast 2. Wuming nodded, thinking that Tiamat was also called a beast. "By the way, where are Tachika and the others?" Merlin pointed upstairs. "Tachika and Matthew fell asleep after coming back. Probably because you were here, their tense nerves are rarely relaxed. In addition, I also cast a slight sleep illusion on them. They are now in a state of rest where they won't be easily disturbed by external sounds. Indeed, according to the character of Gadatsi and Matthew, if Wuming wasn't there, the two of them would probably not be able to sleep because of Tiamat. At most, they could only take a nap for a while." Sure enough, the task of saving the world is still too heavy for two little girls. Yes, in Wuming's eyes, Gadatsi and Matthew were just two little girls. Excluding all external factors, Wuming also wanted to help them because of this. It's still a matter of mentality. You see, the people in the city look like they are having a party. Merlin walked to the window and looked at the people coming and going on the street outside. There was no fear on everyone's face. Instead, it was like an ordinary day. There were even many smiling faces. They can still smile in the 6 months of the demonic beast invasion. It really proves that their mentality is much better than Tachika and Matthew, but that's just a matter of time. Gadotsi and Mashu were modern people, but these people were from the gods' generation. In Wuming's view, the people under the rule of Gilgamesh wouldn't be melancholy because of the doomsday that had yet to come. If they were melancholy because of this, it would be a waste of the time before the doomsday. Yes, humans have been trying to enjoy every day. It's really great. Merlin looked at all this with a smile and seemed to enjoy it quite a bit. Wuming felt that Merlin was more and more strange. Even if it was a half-dream demon, it was still a half-dream demon. And for a half-dream demon, nightmares were delicious. How could people who smiled have nightmares? And Merlin liked to see human happy endings. How could this not be strange? However, it was precisely because of this that Merlin could become friends with Wuming. "I'm back." At this moment, a greeting voice suddenly came from the door. Wuming turned his head and looked. "Anna?" Chapter 10:11. Yes, it was the girl Anna who walked in from the door, but now she no longer covered her face with the hood of the cloak, and there was a smile on Anna's face. "Welcome back, Anna. Did you go to the old lady's house in the nearby flower shop again?" Wuming glanced at Merlin. When he heard Merlin say that Gadotsi and Matthew were sleeping, he also thought that Anna was also sleeping, so he didn't ask where Anna was. In the end, Anna just went out. It could only be said that Merlin played a word game with him. Of course, in the end, it was still Wuming who didn't pay attention to this. "Well, I still have to go out. I just came back to put something away." Anna nodded silently. She wasn't surprised that Merlin knew her whereabouts. After all, Merlin was a voyeur. But today, Anna was in a good mood, so she wasn't going to trouble Merlin. Later, under the puzzled eyes of Wuming and Merlin, Anna walked into the kitchen and immediately walked out. After Anna walked out, Wuming immediately spoke. "Anna, I have something to ask you." Anna stopped when she heard this, as if she was a little hesitant. Seeing that Anna seemed to have something to do, Wuming proposed a solution. "It's just a very ordinary thing. I'll go out with you. We can finish it on the way." Anna thought about it and finally nodded. Later, Wuming and Anna walked out of the Chaldean embassy together. After seeing the two leave, Merlin walked into the kitchen to see what Anna had just taken or put away. As a result, he saw a plate on the kitchen table with a trace of cake left on it. "This is the plate I put the butter cake on." Merlin's cry came from the kitchen, alarming the fufu upstairs. Gadotsi and Matthew did not hear Merlin's cry because of Merlin's illusion. On the street, Wuming glanced at the elven embassy behind him. He seemed to have heard Merlin's sorrowful cry. Or was Wuming hallucinating? Anna, on the other hand, noticed that the wailing belonged to Merlin, but she did not feel guilty at all. "What's the matter?" Anna's sudden question made Wuming ignore Merlin's sorrowful cry. "I have something for you." Then, Wuming waved his hand, and a golden ripple appeared in front of Anna. A golden shadow appeared and fell out. Anna subconsciously grabbed it. "This is the Holy Grail?" That's right. Anna was holding the Holy Grail in her hand. However, Anna was a little puzzled. Why did Wuming give her the Holy Grail? "I took this Holy Grail from Winterwood City. Sakura Madu, who was taken away by me, was sealed in the Holy Grail." Wuming's words made Anna's body tremble. As the first master she met, Anna was quite fond of the young Sakura Madu. After learning that Sakura Madu's entire world was burned down, Anna was more than once worried about what would happen to Sakura Madu after she left. Fortunately, in the end, Wuming promised to take good care of Sakura Madu, so Anna left without any worries. Anna originally thought that Sakura Madu would be taken to that place called Chaldea. In the end, Anna did not expect that Sakura Madu would be stuffed into the Holy Grail by Wuming. Cough, cough. It's not that it's not good for her. The Holy Grail is more than half a magic furnace. Staying in the Holy Grail for a long time and receiving a large amount of magic power baptism, it's good for increasing her potential and ability as a magician. Wuming seemed to be forcing an explanation as he said it without blushing. At first, Wuming only wanted to temporarily store Sakura Madu in the Holy Grail and release Sakura Madu when he was free. In the end, who would have thought that a series of events would occur, causing Wuming to have no choice but to entrust the Holy Grail to Kingu. Fortunately, Kingu did not do anything to Sakura Madu, or rather, it did not discover that Sakura Madu was in the Holy Grail. In the end, after a series of events, it returned to Wuming's hands. However, what Wuming said about increasing Sakura Madu's ability was not false. When Sakura Madu came out of the Holy Grail, her magic circuit and the quality of her magic power would be greatly improved. Wuming came to find Anna to exchange Sakura Madu with Anna. At the very least, Sakura Madu and Anna had to meet. When to release Sakura Madu from the Holy Grail was also up to Anna to decide. You probably think that you appeared because of Gorgon, but I think that you appeared because of Sakura Madu. After Wuming finished speaking, he closed his mouth, and Anna also fell into silence. The two of them did not stop walking, as Anna, who was extremely compatible with Sakura Madu, and both of them were quite young. The relationship between Sakura Madu and Sakura Madu was no longer limited to the relationship of master and servant. The two of them were already friends, and even the only family. Perhaps Sakura Madu, who was sleeping in the Holy Grail, subconsciously summoned Anna in this era. But no matter what, Sakura Madu was fine, and that was the most important thing. Anna, is this the place? Wuming's words pulled Anna back from her thoughts. Anna looked up and saw that she had already arrived in front of a shop with all kinds of flowers. Yes, it's here. Anna nodded. Wuming squatted down and touched Anna's little head. I also know about her situation. After the human nature fever is over, I will properly deal with her problem, but for now, you should keep the Holy Grail and her safe. Then, Wuming stood up, turned around, and left. While Anna continued to be in a daze, an old woman walked out of the flower shop with some trembling. Anna, you're back. Hearing the old woman's voice, Anna instantly hid the Holy Grail under her cloak. Yes, Grandma, I'm back. Did the plate with the butter cake properly return to its original position? Oh, sure enough, the butter cake brought by Anna is more delicious than the one I made. This old woman also rarely enjoyed it. The old woman seemed to be reminiscing, her squinted eyes slightly opened. Anna knew that this old woman was too old to taste anything, but at this moment, the old woman was really reminiscing, which meant that she tasted the flavor of the butter cake. Anna didn't notice this before. Obviously, someone did something to the butter cake. Merlin, Anna thought to herself. Yes, I put it back in the kitchen. Grandma, I still think that the butter cake you made is delicious, but next time I will bring you such delicious butter cake again. No need, Anna. This old woman isn't used to such good food. You can keep it for yourself in the future. You're the most beautiful girl I have ever seen. Don't wrong yourself. After all, even if this old woman can safely survive the apocalypse, she doesn't have much time left. Also, if you like the butter cake I made, I will make it for you every time you come. No need, Grandma. You need more rest. I will continue to help you take care of the flowers. Anna continued to chat with the old woman while busying herself in the old woman's shop. The old woman took out a garland when Anna wasn't paying attention. Wuming didn't continue to watch, but turned around and left. After all, Wuming also guessed what would happen next. Not far away, in the Chaldean embassy, Merlin washed the plate that Anna returned before and put it aside. Then he stroked the head of Fufu who came beside him without him knowing. So it was Anna who fed you a little before taking away the cake, Caspelug. Chapter 10-12. Wuming came to the Uruk wall where the seal of divinity, Dinger, was placed and looked towards the southwest. At this moment, the dark clouds were approaching the Uruk. Although the sea of black mud could not be seen with the naked eye, Wuming could still feel that the sea level was rising. The sea of black mud that was blocked by Nabistan's tooth was getting more and more turbulent. As the last few humans in the north had retreated into the Uruk, countless Ramu that could not find any living humans were wandering around the vast land outside the Uruk. They were going crazy because they could not enter the Uruk. However, the number of the mermaid crew, one of the 11 mythical beasts, was decreasing. It seemed like the other Ramu had killed them and turned them into Ramu. However, no matter how many Ramu there were, they could not enter the wizardry barrier that was set up by Wuming's relic above the Uruk. Bless the world with this body, my god treat. Level, A++ type. Wizardry relic distance, Maximum catch. Hyunryong, who was defined as a god, was separated from the humans and returned to heaven. This relic was created by the humans' belief in Hyunryong. It was the last bit of power that protected the humans. It represented the separation of humans and God, which was the gradual disappearance of mysteries. After that, the era of gods would completely disappear and the humans would usher in their own era. The specific effect was that mysteries that were malicious to the humans would be annihilated, while mysteries that were kind to the humans would be weakened. This relic represented the irreversible force of the separation of humans and gods and the disappearance of the era of gods. Although it had a certain effect on Wu Ming and the rest, it only weakened them and did not affect them much. To the mythical beasts, not only were they separated, but they were also hostile to the humans. Therefore, when the light film shrouded the Uruk, a small number of Ramu and Kuru in the Uruk light film were physically separated. However, if it was to deal with Tiamat, this relic might not be enough to separate her. Therefore, as long as Tiamat personally came, the human race would definitely perish. However, no matter how hard Wu Ming looked, he could not see a trace of Tiamat's figure. Hiding underground was even more ridiculous. Zhuge Kong Ming had already moved the Stone Warrior 8 formations to the southeast. If Tiamat was moving underground, they would be able to discover it. Since there was no sign of Tiamat, it was obvious that Tiamat had not moved at all. Do you think that Ramu alone could destroy mankind? Or does Tiamat have other secrets? Wu Ming muttered to himself. Wu Ming believed that the latter was more reliable. At the very least, these Ramu were Tiamat's children. If they could not defeat them after a long time, they would definitely attack Tiamat. His Excellency Hyunryong. A lively childlike voice entered Wu Ming's ears. Wu Ming turned his head and found that it was Nuwakamaru. There were 2 people behind him. They were the remaining 2 lancers who were guarding the north wall. The soldiers at the north wall had retreated, so they naturally retreated as well. "Everyone, how have you been?" Wu Ming greeted them. His Excellency Hyunryong is thinking about Tiamat's matter. Musasobo Benkei, who followed Nuwakamaru to Wu Ming's side, looked into the distance and said in a muffled voice, "Tiamat hasn't moved for so long. There must be something going on." "Leonidas," I answered Musasobo Benkei. "We can't continue to waste time with Tiamat. If she doesn't come to us, we have to go to her." Wu Ming's face became firm. They might have to take the initiative to attack. When Nuwakamaru and the other 2 heard this, their faces changed like Wu Ming's, but they also agreed with Wu Ming's words. They had no way to waste time with Tiamat. Several servants belonging to the Uruk were cut off from Gilgamesh's magic supply. They had to rely on food to survive. In addition, all the existing humans in this era were gathered in the Uruk. The food could not last for more than a few days. When the time came, there was no need for Ramu and Tiamat. The humans would starve to death. "Your Excellency, do you mean that Tiamat is deliberately wasting time with us?" However, Wu Ming shook his head and denied Musasobo Benkei's words. "She doesn't need to do this. I suspect that Tiamat is restricted by something and can't move for a while." It was said that Tiamat had a huge dragon body. She only used her body to carry out physical attacks, and humans would be easily defeated. Therefore, Wu Ming believed that Tiamat was temporarily unable to move for some reason. Wu Ming decided to go back and ask Enkidu. She should know about Tiamat. Looking at the gradually darkening sky, Wu Ming shook his head. "Let's wait until tomorrow to let everyone have a good rest tonight. Let's have a good rest tonight. If there's anything, we can discuss it tomorrow." The 3 of them nodded as they understood what Wu Ming meant. At this moment, Tiamat could not move, and the demonic beasts outside Uruk could not enter. Now was a precious and rare time to rest. How could they not make good use of it? It was a quiet night. Whether it was a king or a civilian, whether it was a servant or a master, everyone had a good rest. After all, with Wu Ming's noble phantasm, they did not have to worry about the invasion of demonic beasts. In the Chaldean embassy, Wu Ming woke up early in the morning and began to prepare breakfast. That's right, Wu Ming stayed in the Chaldean embassy last night. As for the room, Wu Ming slept on the roof. The Mesopotamia region was not said to be like spring all year round, but the temperature difference between summer and winter was not very big. Even if he slept outdoors, it would be fine, not to mention that Wu Ming was a servant. Ah, I slept so well last night. Gadatsi yawned as she walked down the stairs and came to the first floor. Yes, Senpai. When the doctor contacted me this morning, he said that Senpai's body had an unprecedented rest in all aspects. Matthew echoed behind Gadatsi. Fufu, who was like a squirrel, also called twice. Fufu is also very energetic. Matthew picked up Fufu. Gadatsi did not answer Matthew's previous question because she saw Wu Ming. Assassin, you can cook? Gadatsi looked at Wu Ming, who was wearing a Mesopotamia apron, carrying a stack of food that she did not know the name of, to the table. There were several plates on the table, all of which were filled with food that Gadatsi had never seen before. It smells so good. Matthew also ignored the previous topic because of Wu Ming's food. Whoa, I haven't heard of this food for many years. It reminds me of the story of the king who often went to the kitchen to steal food. Merlin also walked down the stairs in a strange manner. Wu Ming glared at Merlin. Merlin smiled awkwardly and did not speak again. After all, if it wasn't for Wu Ming being merciful last night, Merlin would have been the one sleeping on the roof. Is there butter cake? Anna's slightly shy voice followed Merlin's. There is no butter cake, but I made some modern snacks. Anna can try them later. Mesopotamia's butter cake was somewhat different from modern butter cake, so Wu Ming did not try to make it, but he did bake some modern snacks. Go wash up first. There will be guests later. Guests? Gadatsi and Matthew looked at each other, and both saw doubt in each other's eyes. But it did not matter. They would know later. Chapter 10:13. Everyone came to the table after washing up and sat down. They found that there were more and more dishes on the table, and it didn't seem like the five of them could finish it all. Villo Senpai, how many guests are there? Matthew wiped the cold sweat on his forehead and smiled awkwardly. Don't worry, they're here. Wu Ming pointed to the door, and three figures appeared at the door. Miss Nawakamaru, Mr. Chin, Mr. Leonidas. Matthew was surprised. Mr. Fujimura, Mr. Matthew, long time no see. Nawakamaru greeted them calmly, but she didn't have much contact with Chaldea, so she didn't say much. Musasobo Benkei and Leonidas, I were the same. The three of them were either at the northern wall or at the temporary stronghold built in the northwest, while Fujimaru and the others were either in the Uruk or the dense forest in the south. Although they were familiar with each other, they were only familiar with each other. In terms of familiarity, Wu Ming was much more familiar to Nawakamaru than Gadatsi and the others. Nawakamaru and the others sat down calmly, but the inexplicably lengthened table and the dishes on the table still couldn't be finished by three more people. At this time, a lively voice came from the door. Yo, big sister, I'm here. Quizzer dragged the weak leopard man into the Chaldean embassy. She found a seat and sat down, and instantly threw the leopard man to the seat next to her. Miss Quizzard is here too? Matthew was surprised again. Gadatsi was quite interested in the leopard man's current state, but she could probably guess that he was beaten up by Quizzard because he provoked Quizzard. I was invited by Hyunryong for breakfast. Quizzard smiled sweetly at Gadatsi. So, Nawakamaru and the others are the same? Gadatsi guessed. Yes, Mr. Fujimaru. We're not the only ones invited. As if agreeing with Nawakamaru's words, another person, or rather a golden king, came in from the entrance of the Chaldean embassy. Ha 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 ha, this king's arrival, the entire Chaldean embassy, seems to be a lot brighter. The newcomer was naturally Gilgamesh. King Gilgamesh. This time, Gadatsi and Matthew were shocked. They really didn't expect Gilgamesh to be among the guests. What's the point of being so arrogant? Even if it's brighter, it's all because of this goddess. Ishtar, who came in later, crossed her arms and looked at Gilgamesh with disdain. Oh, the goddess of greed even wants to take this king's glory for herself. Gilgamesh mocked mercilessly. You shiny golden guy. I hope you die of overwork. However, before Gilgamesh and Ishtar could quarrel, Siduri's figure came in. Okay, king and goddess. Today you were invited by Hyunryong, Sama, to enjoy breakfast. You can't be so rude. Her words, which were neither flattering nor harsh, made Gilgamesh and Ishtar both shut their mouths. Siduri, the two of them really can't do anything to you. Enkidu, who had a smile on his face, walked in holding Funbaba's hand. You're exaggerating. Siduri bowed. In this regard, Gadotsi and Matthew were almost stunned. Good heavens, all the powerful forces of this era had gathered together. However, only Wuming knew that Ereshkigal was still missing, but that couldn't be helped. After all, she couldn't leave the underworld. Okay, everyone, hurry up and take a seat. This is my cooking that I haven't made for a long time. Hurry up and try it. Hearing this, Gilgamesh and the others also sat down. Seeing so many powerful gods and kings sitting next to them, Gadotsi and Matthew were a little uncomfortable. The two were still thinking about whether to change seats. However, Gilgamesh also said that this banquet was hosted by Wuming after all, and even he couldn't steal the limelight. What he meant was, no matter who was in charge, they could sit anywhere. Everyone began to enjoy the food. At this moment, it was as if they really obeyed Gilgamesh's order. Everyone, including Gadotsi, was no longer restrained and completely let go of their limbs. Leonidas I and Yuzusobo Benkei competed in drinking Quizzard as the big sister played with Gadotsi. Matthew and Anna discussed which snacks Wuming made were delicious. Gilgamesh and Ishtar were once again at each other's throats, and Siduri was the lubricant between them. Enkidu looked at this scene and smiled helplessly, then looked at Wuming, who was chatting with Nawakamaru. As for the leopard man, he was bragging with Funbaba and Fufu, but he was ignored by the two beasts. Now, it didn't seem like they were facing the coming doomsday at all, but more like an ordinary party. Roman, who was in Chaldea and watching this scene through Gadotsi's bracelet, sighed. I really don't know whether to be happy or sad. By the way, Roman showed a tangled expression. Roman was happy to see everyone in a good mood, but their good mood made Roman a little worried. After all, there was still the threat of Tiamat. However, Leonardo da Vinci didn't care so much. Instead, he smiled. This is a bit like a different version of the Last Supper. The Last Supper that Leonardo da Vinci made before his death seemed to be comfortable, but it was actually a crisis. Now, the banquet in the Chaldean embassy was just like that. You're so careless. Roman rolled his eyes at Leonardo da Vinci. This was probably the benefit of being a servant. There was no need to think too much. But no matter how you look at it, it's breakfast. Looking at the harmonious table in the monitor, Roman gave up complaining about Leonardo da Vinci, and he gradually immersed himself in this warm scene. After all, it's good to do this occasionally, isn't it? I'm hungry. I'm going to get a cup of coffee. Roman got up and left the monitor. However, Leonardo da Vinci sat in Roman's position and waved at Roman like a rich man. By the way, help me get a cup. The cup is next to the coffee machine. Thank you. Yes, yes, understood. The meal was very fast, and the delicious food that everyone enjoyed in Chaldean embassy was quickly wiped out. After that, everyone went to the highest floor of the tower, Gilgamesh's office, between the throne. Gilgamesh, who was sitting on the high throne, glanced at the people standing neatly in front of him and immediately spoke. So, Tiamat's counterattack strategy meeting, let's start now. Gilgamesh's imposing words entered everyone's ears, and most people's faces became extremely serious. The reason why it was most people was because there were a small number of people who didn't become serious, but showed a surprised expression. Hey, wait a minute, counterattack. Are we going to counterattack Tiamat? Chapter 10:14. Matthew and Gadotsi were the only two people who were surprised. That's right. I think you have also noticed that we don't have much food left, and all the humans in Mesopotamia have gathered in the Uruk. Although there is no problem for the time being, in a few days, the shortage of food will appear, and we will be in trouble. Gadotsi and Matthew heard Wuming's words and instantly understood. After all, they were modern people, and they could understand what would happen in the Uruk through the usual compulsory education. At that time, humans would starve to death because they were trapped in the Uruk without food, and in serious cases, there might be riots. After all, Appetite was one of the most basic desires of humans, and there was no way to suppress it. Once it broke out, it would be more terrible than a natural disaster. Outside the Uruk were Ramu, and humans could not go out to look for food. Only servants could do it, but there was no way to get food for so many people with only a few servants. Therefore, the only way was to take the initiative to attack, and the main attacker was Wooming. Wooming talked to Gilgamesh last night about this matter, and Gilgamesh also agreed. In fact, whether we take the initiative to attack or wait for Tiamat to attack, our chances of winning are very low. Leonardo da Vinci's voice came from Gadotzi's bracelet. After all, the opponent was the god of creation. So, whether we take the initiative to attack or passively defend, the probability of winning is almost the same. Although Roman's words were discouraged, it also meant that taking the initiative to attack was better than passively defending. Why didn't Tiamat take the initiative to attack? Gadotzi was quite puzzled. That's because Mother is bound. Enkidu stood up. Bound? Matthew could not help but be stunned. And that's the binding that Tiamat put on herself. Wooming interrupted. What? Whether it was Gadotzi, Matthew, or the others, they were more or less surprised by this. Why? Gadotzi asked. She didn't understand why she would impose restrictions on herself. Because Mother has always loved humans and their children. That's why she added restrictions to herself. Enkidu, who had fused with Kingu, was well aware of this. Wooming had also asked Enkidu about this last night. At this moment, Gilgamesh, who was sitting on the throne, suddenly interrupted. Do you know that humans are evil? Humans are evil. Gadotzi and Matthew looked at each other in confusion. The two goddesses, Quizzard and Ishtar, had a serious look in their eyes. It was obvious that the two of them knew that humans were evil. Humans are evil. Roman from Chaldea repeated silently. Humans are evil beasts of original sin. There are a total of 7 original sin beasts, and they're disasters that could destroy humans. Merlin also spoke, but in the end, it was still Roman who explained. Humans are evil refers to various disasters that threaten human history and destroy humans. They are born from human civilization and grow stronger with the development of human civilization. They will destroy the civilization from the inside of human society. They're like cancer cells. Furthermore, as long as human beings exist, this evil will not disappear. It will grow stronger with the development of human civilization. To put it simply, it was an existence that accompanied humans. Because of the disasters caused by the bestial nature of humans, humans are also called beasts. Tiamat is the second beast that holds the principle of return, Beast 2. Merlin finished Roman's sentence, then looked at Wooming and signaled for Wooming to continue. With a helpless smile, Wooming spoke. The essence of human evil is human love. It is precisely because of this that Tiamat, who loves her lover and her children, will become one of the human evils. Gadotzi and Matthew suddenly understood. After that, Wooming inexplicably thought of the human final trial he encountered in the box garden world. Moreover, human evil is not the evil that destroys humans, but the evil that destroys humans. That is, the existence that humans need to overcome. Only by overcoming it can humans continue to develop. Therefore, in a sense, it is not wrong to call it the human final trial. After all, human evil is a disaster for humans, and it is not wrong to call it the human final trial. The existence that needs to be overcome, human final trial. Matthew and Gadotzi, who were present as humans, muttered silently. Seeing Gadotzi and Matthew in deep thought, Wooming walked in front of the two, stretched out his hand, and gave them a knock on the head. Ah, it hurts, Senior Villo. Gadotzi covered her head with tears and looked at Wooming. Matthew performed better than Gadotzi. He did not cry out in pain, but she also covered her head. Although it is said that the human final trial needs humans to overcome it, it is just a formality. It is not necessary for humans to overcome it. For the self-destruction mechanism of humans, such as the 7 human evils, the suppression force has already prepared a corresponding safety device, which is the 7 crown servants. The shaped moon world is different from the box garden world. In the box garden world, the human final trial is a special existence. To defeat, kill, or even overcome the other party requires special conditions. The most critical condition is that you must have the identity of a human. The human final trial in the shaped moon world is just a title that Wu Ming casually said. It has no special power, so humans do not need to overcome it personally. Seeing the doubts on their faces, Wu Ming directly gave an example. The first Hassan you have seen is the crown assassin. These words directly made Gadotsi and Matthew almost fall to the ground. They knew that the first Hassan was very strong, but they didn't expect the other party to have such an identity. In other words, the reason why the first Hassan helped us is because of the appearance of one of the human evils. However, no one answered Gadotsi's question, because the people present were very clear that Tiamat had undergone a qualitative change. She was no longer a simple human evil. Even the first Hassan couldn't even get close to Tiamat. All of this was attributed to the root black mud, and it was precisely because of this that Wu Ming took all the burden on himself. Emotionally, only Wu Ming could deal with Tiamat, who was infected with the root black mud. Others were easily eroded by the black mud and assimilated. Reasonably, the root black mud and Wu Ming had a great relationship. The reason why Tiamat was infected with the root black mud may have an indirect relationship with Wu Ming. Therefore, Wu Ming had to take on this burden. In short, my trump card can deal with Tiamat. You just need to be responsible for covering me. Chapter 10:15. Wu Ming said as he stretched out his hands and rubbed Gadotsi and Matthew's little heads. In fact, Wu Ming didn't mention one thing. He was worried that Tiamat had other means. Therefore, Wu Ming chose to let himself, the only one who was not afraid of the black root soil, face Tiamat, so as not to let other people have an accident. After being attached by the black root soil, in addition to being hostile to Wu Ming, their own abilities would also be changed or enhanced. That is, the enemy who is already very powerful would become even stronger. As the god of creation, Tiamat was already very strong, and with the blessing of the black root soil, she would definitely become stronger, and maybe she would have some new tricks. The best way was to let some people stay in the Uruk. Wu Ming had already talked to Gilgamesh about this issue last night. Therefore, Gilgamesh directly ordered, "Now, let's discuss the problem of grouping. After that, let's face the god of creation and launch the final attack." The humans in the Uruk were still doing their duty, and even most of the soldiers were arranged by Gilgamesh to do something within their ability. Only some soldiers were still guarding the 360-degree city wall surrounding the Uruk, and their task was only to be stationed on the city wall to monitor the movements of the Ramu army outside. After all, ordinary human soldiers were not useful at all in this counterattack strategy. Although it was cruel to say that human soldiers couldn't do anything in the face of the Ramu army except to die and increase the combat power of the Ramu army. On the city wall in the southwest corner of the Uruk, Gilgamesh, Gadotsi, Matthew, the followers, and several Quizzard's pterosaurs gathered together. However, everyone was clearly divided into two teams and stood in front of Gilgamesh. Quizzard, Ishtar, Gadotsi, Matthew, Merlin, Nawakaru, and Musasobo Benkei were responsible for covering Wu Ming. Enkidu, Funbaba, Leonidas I, Anna, and Leopard Man were responsible for guarding the Uruk with Gilgamesh. Quizzard and Ishtar were very powerful goddesses, so naturally, they wouldn't choose to stay behind. Although Nawakaru was a general-like figure, his class was rider, and his mobility wasn't low, he was more suitable for taking the initiative to attack. After Musasobo Benkei overcame his fear, he had to follow Nawakamaru no matter when and where, unless he died. Nawakamaru had to admit that this made her feel very helpless. Although she was very pleased that Sea Lord Chong Lu had become so brave, there was no need for him to become so excessive. It was almost becoming an obsession. Therefore, Nawakaru and Musasobo Benkei were assigned to the attack team, and Leonidas I was forced to stay behind because of his strong defensive ability. Enkidu and Funbaba were instructed by Wu Ming to stay behind, and Anna also stayed behind because of Wuming's concern. After all, Anna still needed to protect the Holy Grail where Sakura Madu was. As for the Leopard Man, he was instructed by Quizzard to stay behind. According to Quizzard's words, don't underestimate the Leopard Man. However, anyone could tell that this wasn't the real reason. In short, Wuming was relieved to have a good defensive team guarding the Uruk. Moreover, there was also Zhuge Kongming, who hadn't shown his face since returning to the Uruk. Wuming believed that even if there was an accident, the Uruk would be safe with the presence of staying behind. As for why Merlin joined the attack team, it was entirely because he was coerced by Wuming. With Gilgamesh and Zhuge Kongming, there was no need for Merlin to stay behind at all. In addition, Merlin had been pretending to be weak, so Wuming, who was a little unhappy, made this decision. Finally, it was Gadatsi and Matthew. Gadatsi and Matthew could stay in the Uruk. There was no need for them to go out and take risks. Although Gadatsi and Matthew's decision was strongly opposed by the two at first, after listening to Gadatsi's reason, the way everyone looked at Gadatsi changed. Human evil needs to be overcome by humans. I won't and don't want to escape. Even if the main attacker was Wuming, Gadatsi believed that as the only master of mankind and one of the last remaining humans, she had to bear witness to all this. It didn't matter even if the end was really death. Wuming was very sure that Gadatsi was touched by his previous words. Although he was worried about Gadatsi's safety, Wuming also felt gratified for Gadatsi at the same time. It was the kind of gratification that one would feel when seeing their younger sister grow up. And not only Wuming, but the others were also touched by this. If Quizzard and Ishtar still regarded Gadatsi as an immature little girl before, now, they have regarded Gadatsi as a real qualified master. Matthew was affected by Gadatsi's strong inner feelings and supported Gadatsi's idea. Moreover, as Gadatsi's follower, Matthew had no reason to let his master go to the front line alone. Therefore, Matthew would also follow Quizzard and others to cover Wuming. For the decision of the two, Gilgamesh also praised Gadatsi and Matthew, saying that there really are people in the future who didn't let this king down. At this moment, Gilgamesh faced the people who were divided into two teams and repeated the content of the plan. The defense team will stay with this king in Uruk to prevent accidents or provide support. The attack team needs to take Quizzard's pterosaur to the Persian Gulf, and then fully cover Hyunryong to release his trump card to eliminate Tiamat. Of course, your own safety is the prerequisite. That's all. Is there a problem? No. Although only Gadatsi and Matthew answered. In fact, Gilgamesh was talking to Gadatsi and Matthew. After all, everyone else was a servant. To put it bluntly, the servant's body was not the servant's body. If they died, they would die, and there would be no image. But if Gadatsi and Matthew, as human beings, had an accident, there would be no room for recovery. Then, Roman's voice came from Gadatsi's bracelet. According to the detection, the number of Ramu on the land has exceeded 300 million, and it is still increasing. The speed of the increase of Ramu is also rising rapidly. Roman and Leonardo da Vinci in Chaldea looked at the number of Ramu on the screen that was still increasing, and they couldn't help but frown. Although this was bad news, there was also good news at the same time. However, these Ramu can only move on the ground. There are no aerial units yet. After all, there was already the winged mermaid Kuru that could fly in the sky, so Roman also paid attention to it. But there is no guarantee that there will not be any enemy flying units, so when you get close to Tiamat, you must be very careful. Don't relax your vigilance against the Ramu just because they can fly. Leonardo da Vinci also warned. Of course, he was still talking to Gadatsi and Matthew. Yes, we understand, Leonardo da Vinci. Gadatsi nodded seriously. Finally, as the Uruk king, Gilgamesh issued the final order. So, let's go everyone. This king is looking forward to your triumphant return. Chapter 10:16. The three Quetzalcoatlus carried Gadatsi, Matthew, Nuwakaru, Musasobo Benkei, and Merlin respectively. Quizzard rode on her exclusive Quetzalcoatlus and flew into the sky with the five of them. Ishtar and Wuming both had their own means of flight, so they didn't need Quizzard's Quetzalcoatlus. Under the gaze of the few people stationed in Uruk, led by Gilgamesh, the four Quetzalcoatlus, Tianzhou, and a figure who flew into the sky without catching any tools left one after another. Thus, the plan to counterattack Tiamat officially began. In a place where no one could see, Gilgamesh's mouth moved slightly. The future of mankind, please. Because Rama didn't have the ability to fly, and Kuru was close to extinction, the attack team didn't encounter any obstacles in the sky. They soon arrived at the original Persian Gulf coastline. The reason why it was called the original Persian Gulf coastline was because this place had long been submerged by the sea of black mud, and the sky had long been covered by dark clouds, and no trace of sunlight could be seen. Roman, who had repeatedly confirmed the location through the electronic map in Chaldea, spoke with great certainty from Gadatsi's bracelet. "It's here." Looking at her bracelet, Gadatsi nodded, then looked at Wuming, who was flying beside her. "From here on out, we must be vigilant. After all, the real sea was in front of them, and the depth was different from the submerged land. There was no guarantee that there would be something hidden. In that case, let's fly higher first." After Quizzard finished speaking, the four Quetzalcoatlus all flew higher. Gadatsi was wearing a special magic dress made by Leonardo da Vinci. Even if they flew higher, it wouldn't affect Gadatsi's breathing. Ishtar also increased his altitude. On the other hand, Wuming did not increase his altitude. In fact, he even lowered his altitude. That's right, he did this to cover everyone, which was the so-called bait. Danger was often called danger because it was often hidden in the dark. If the hidden danger could be brought to the light, then Gadatsi and the others would be much safer. Naturally, Wuming, who was the strongest, would take the risk. And Wuming didn't believe that there was no danger in the sea of black mud. Sure enough, a mouthful of black mud suddenly jumped out of the black mud and bit at Wuming. It wasn't exactly a bite, because this bloody mouth could swallow Wuming in one bite. The assassin, Gadatsi, who was high in the sky, couldn't help but shout. She didn't see Wuming escape from this giant mouth. Could Wuming have been eaten? The answer was of course no. "Senior, look over there. Senior Villo is there." Matthew touched Gadatsi and pointed to the sky in the distance. Wuming's figure was floating there steadily, and beside Wuming was a dark purple portal. So the assassin managed to escape. I almost forgot about that ability of his. Phew, Gadatsi was relieved and took a deep breath. But what is this thing? Gudazi was naturally talking about the big mouth of the muddy basin below. That's the mouth of a magical beast. Ishtar, who was holding Anna on her horse, said quietly as she flew to Gadatsi and Matthew's side. The mouth of a magical beast. This frightened the two girls. The mouth below was so big that it could eat 4 or 5 people in one bite. How big was the body of such a magical beast? Gadatsi and Matthew weren't the only ones who wanted to see the true face of this magical beast. Others also wanted to know, including Wuming. He wanted to see what the true face of this magical beast that he couldn't detect with his mental strength was. At that moment, Wuming waved his hand, and a book full of ancient meanings suddenly appeared in Wuming's hand. This was a nameless spell book. Every page represented a magic spell, and the further down the page, the higher the level of the magical beast, and the more powerful the spell was. The book moved without wind, and the pages were flipped. Finally, it stopped on a page. This page represented a supreme spell, and it was the kind that didn't require the skill to be shaken and could be used directly. Then, Wuming tore off this page and threw it into the portal beside him that hadn't closed yet. Pa! Wuming snapped his fingers, and the portal closed immediately. However, in the next second, the huge closed mouth suddenly expanded, then suddenly contracted, and then expanded again. The huge mouth opened towards the sky, and the blue and white light of destruction shot straight into the sky. With the huge mouth as the center, the sea of black mud also shook violently. The light of destruction brushed past the feathered serpent that Gadatsi and Matthew were riding, and it gave Gadatsi, Matthew, and the winged serpent a fright. Fufu. Fufu suddenly jumped out of Matthew's shield and howled a few times at the huge mouth below. It seemed that he was also frightened. Fufu, did you hide in the storage compartment of my shield again? Matthew's shield had been modified by Leonardo da Vinci. It could be used to store supplies or to store recycled holy grails, and Fufu had hidden in it more than once. Worried that Fufu would accidentally fall, Matthew hurriedly hugged Fufu in his arms. You should have stayed in Uruk, Fufu. However, it was useless to say anything at this moment. The key was the true face of the magical beast with the huge mouth. It was a huge dog, or rather, it was the world of Warcraft Ulidium. Roar! Due to the influence of Wooming's supreme spell, a lot of the black mud on the huge mouth was shaken off, and because of the shaking, the body under the huge mouth was also exposed. It was a huge red-haired dog on all fours, and there was even a lot of black mud on its red hair. The world of Warcraft Ulidium. Gadatsi couldn't believe it. This was a magical beast that was even bigger than a magical beast commander. At this moment, the winged serpent carrying Merlin approached, and Merlin's voice also reached Gadatsi's ears. This is the real son that Tiamat gave birth to alone, one of the 11 sons of Tiamat, the world of Warcraft Ulidium. That's right, it was neither a mass-produced magical beast nor a so-called magical beast commander, but one of the 11 sons of Tiamat, the world of Warcraft Ulidium. I'm afraid that this Black Sea has already become Tiamat's nest. Roman's voice also came from the bracelet. And Tiamat has probably produced all the other magical beasts, Leonardo da Vinci said. As if confirming Leonardo da Vinci's words, Ulidium howled. A wolf. Accompanied by this wolf-like howl, huge figures emerged from the sea of black mud one after another. Chapter 10:17. One after another, huge figures emerged from the sea of black mud. Black mud fell from their bodies bit by bit, revealing their figures. Ulidim, who had the appearance of a wolf dog, the venomous snake Bashmu, the huge sun lion Uggle, the three-horned lion dragon Uggle, the seven-headed snake Muxilmafu, the demonic bull Catholicu, who had abandoned the appearance of a human bull and appeared on all fours, Kitabu, who had also abandoned the appearance of a scorpion and turned into a giant scorpion, Meshuxu, who had 4 legs, the angry snake Kuru, who had abandoned the appearance of a mermaid and turned into a giant fish, Beast, Umdebrido, who had obtained the appearance of shark and was known as the Tempest, and Tiamat's last son, the Chaos Mudman with the same name and identity as the Father of Gods, Ramu. These are the 11 sons of Tiamat. At the same time, they were also the existences that prevented Wooming from getting close to Tiamat. Gadatsi and the others had to protect Wooming from the danger he had to face. Trouble. Even Wooming did not expect that the 11 sons of Tiamat would all appear. However, this was probably the power of the black mud that sped up the birth of Tiamat's the 11 sons. The reason why it was called the 11 sons was because the 11 sons had died long ago. Moreover, these 11 magical beasts were more or less different from the ones recorded in the historical myths. At this moment, the bodies of the magical beasts were basically extremely huge, and the humanoid magical beasts had all turned into their beast forms. The formless Mdebrutu had also turned into a giant shark. Obviously, this was a temporary change made by Tiamat. After all, this was the only way they were real magical beasts. However, Wooming was more concerned about the Ramu. It wasn't much different from the other Ramu in Mesopotamia. At the very least, it wasn't as large as the other Ramu. It was about the same size as the other Ramu, but it was also different from the other mass-produced Ramu. This Ramu's body was not as weak as other mass-produced Ramu. On the contrary, this Ramu's body was abnormally strong. It was even more fit than a bodybuilder. Wooming was sure that this guy was not just for show, but for real. In addition, this Ramu also had a pair of large wings on its back, but they were curled up, so it was hard to tell how big they were. In short, among the 11 magical beasts, Wooming felt that this Ramu was the strongest. WMBFLL, YBFDFZXXDMQCSDJH, YBFQWLK, CDXMRL. The Rama said something to the other magical beasts, and the 11 magical beasts immediately divided into two groups. 5 magical beasts advanced towards the Uruk. Wuming, who could understand the Ramu's words, understood the other party's meaning. They wanted to split into two groups. One group would go to the Uruk to completely destroy the humans, and the other group would stay to deal with them. It seemed that these 11 magical beasts had not been lurking for a long time. They were probably just born not long ago. Otherwise, they wouldn't have waited until Wuming and the others attacked the Uruk before going to the Uruk. After all, if 11 of them attacked the Uruk together, the Uruk's light film would most likely not be able to stop them. Fortunately, Wuming had the foresight to let Enkidu, Funbaba, and the others stay in the Uruk. Although it was not foolproof, it was enough. These 11 magical beasts were extremely powerful. Wuming even had the idea that if they fought alone, Quizzard and Ishtar might not necessarily be the opponents of these magical beasts. However, their goal was not to kill these 11 magical beasts. As long as they delayed these magical beasts and let Wuming deal with Tiamat during this time, everything would be over. However, these magical beasts seemed to be quite smart. After the 5 magical beasts left for the Uruk, the remaining 6 magical beasts all rushed towards Wuming. Only Wuming had the ability to threaten Tiamat, which the magical beasts knew very well. However, Wuming appeared next to Gadatsi with a teleportation portal, causing the 6 magical beasts to miss their target. Assassin, what should we do now? Gadatsi was a little anxious at this moment. However, there was no other way because Roman had been relaying information about the enemy. Each of these 11 magical beasts has magical power comparable to, or even surpassing the Holy Grail. Their strength has even reached the level of the King of Gods. Even Quizzard, the Quetzalcoatl, has a very low chance of winning against one of them. If the goddess Ishtar faces one of them, she is likely to be killed. It's really over this time? Roman's anxious and panicked voice kept coming out of Gadatsi's bracelet. Are these magical beasts so powerful? Matthew was also shocked. After all, she was still immature. She could only sense that these magical beasts were very dangerous, but she did not know how dangerous they were. Don't forget that even Ishtar's father is Tiamat's grandson. These magical beasts are Tiamat's sons. It's understandable that they have the power of the King of Gods. Wuming's words were not unreasonable. If Tiamat's magical beasts were weak, then they were not qualified to fight against the heavenly gods. After all, they would be killed directly by the heavenly gods. Being able to fight against the heavenly gods meant that the 11 sons of Tiamat were very powerful. It could only be said that the previous magical beast commanders were the weaker versions of these 11 magical beasts, and the mass-produced magical beasts were the extremely weak versions of these 11 magical beasts. These 11 magical beasts were the 11 sons of Tiamat. No, it should be strengthened by the black mud. Otherwise, Tiamat would not have given birth to the 11 sons so quickly, and these 11 sons would not have such powerful strength. It could be said that if these 11 magical beasts replaced the 11 sons, the scales of victory might have tilted towards Tiamat's side. Therefore, these magical beasts must have been strengthened by the black mud. Assassin, go directly to Tiamat. We'll hold these magical beasts back. Gadatsi made a prompt decision and issued an order. However, as a master, Gadatsi was still too inexperienced. However, Wuming shook his head. It's impossible for you to beat these guys. You won't even be able to drag it out for long. Not to mention anything else, Gadatsi's combat power was 0. Even if Matthew was included, excluding Wuming, there were only 5 of them, and there were 6 magical beasts here. Roman's words just now were very clear. Quizzard's chances of winning were very low, and Ishtar might even be killed directly. There was one more thing that Roman didn't mention. Even Merlin could only rely on illusion to survive. It was difficult to win in a 1-on-1 situation, let alone a 5-on-6 situation. What's more, there was another extremely frustrating thing. 5 against 6 was just a hypothesis because Matthew, Nwakamaru, and Musasobo Benkei were useless at this moment. Therefore, the real situation was actually 2 against 6. Chapter 10:18. Then what do we do now? Everyone turned their attention to Wuming, including Merlin. Wuming looked at the 6 magical beasts that were charging at them again, thought for a moment, and then said something that made everyone dumbfounded. I'll hold off these 6 magical beasts. You guys go snipe Tiamat. As soon as he said that, everyone's eyes widened. Wait a minute. You're going to deal with 6 magical beasts? Godatsi said worriedly. The strength of these magical beasts was obvious to all. This was no joke. I'm afraid we can't kill Tiamat. This sentence came from Merlin. The 6 magical beasts only attacked Wuming and ignored the others. This meant that only Wuming had the ability to threaten Tiamat. If they couldn't even defeat these magical beasts, how could they deal with Tiamat? There was another point that others didn't know, but Merlin knew very well. First, Hassan couldn't even get close to Tiamat now, let alone them. Without the strength, they probably couldn't even get close. How could they fight? However, Wuming's words changed. That's why I asked you guys to snipe. That's right, Wuming didn't think that they could get close to Tiamat, but they didn't need to. They could just snipe from afar. Immediately, everyone turned their attention to Ishtar. Ishtar was stunned at first, then held her head and looked like she was about to break down. Wait a minute. I can't even defeat these magical beasts. How can I deal with Tiamat? Ishtar's eyes were filled with tears, and she looked like she was going to die. This was a good reason, but don't you still have Gugalana? Wuming spread his hands and suddenly looked like he didn't care. TSK. Suddenly, Ishtar's body froze. However, Godatsi and Matthew looked happy. Right, I almost forgot that Miss Ishtar has the Bowl of Heaven. Ishtar, it's up to you now. The two of them cheered Ishtar on. If it doesn't work, we'll just use Gugalin to escape and switch places with me. Without waiting for Ishtar's response, Wuming turned around and flew downwards, because the 6 magical beasts had already arrived. Good luck, Mistress of the Heavens, Ishtar. I have high hopes for you. After Wuming said some words of encouragement, he directly started fighting with the 6 magical beasts. There's no time to lose. Let's go over first. At that moment, Quizzard also seized the opportunity created by Wuming and commanded the pterosaurs to fly towards Tiamat. Wait a minute. Ishtar's sorrowful cries serve as a prelude to the battle between Wuming and the 6 magical beasts. On the Uruk side, Gilgamesh had already returned to the top of the Divine Tower. He did not do anything and just closed his eyes and waited quietly. Enkidu and Funbaba were playing by the side, while Leonidas, Anna, and the Leopard Man stayed on the southwest wall of the Uruk. At some point, Gilgamesh's aura changed, and then Enkidu spoke. Gil, what are you worried about? However, Gilgamesh, who opened his eyes, shook his head. It's just a bunch of random thoughts. In response, Enkidu smiled mysteriously. In that case, Enkidu decided to change the topic. Sir Hyunryong will definitely succeed. We just need to protect the Uruk, or rather, protect you, the king of humans, in this era. It's about time. Gilgamesh, who was leaning against the throne, rested his face on his arm and glanced toward the southwest. Boom! The sound of a boulder hitting the ground echoed in the sky, and the entire Uruk was shaken. Looks like it's here. Enkidu stopped smiling and hugged Funbaba. That's right, both Enkidu and Gilgamesh knew that the Uruk would definitely be attacked. Enkidu's judgment came from following Wuming, while Gilgamesh's judgment was purely clairvoyant. Let's go, Enkidu. This king wants to see how those beasts attack this king's Uruk. Gilgamesh said, standing up with the help of the handrail and walking down the steps. In response, Enkidu smiled helplessly. I told you to stay on the city wall, and now you want to go over. Idiot, how can this king stay on the front line all the time? Although Gilgamesh said so, as his only friend, Enkidu knew that Gilgamesh needed to rest after coming back. Gilgamesh just took a nap, and the reason why Enkidu took the initiative to speak was because he sensed that Gilgamesh was awake. As Gilgamesh's only friend, Enkidu could sense Gilgamesh's condition even through his aura. Okay, let's go. Enkidu, who also understood that Gilgamesh was at Sundara, stopped discussing this topic and followed Gilgamesh with Funbaba in his arms. Outside the southwest city wall of the Uruk, near Nabistan's Fong, 5 huge monsters were constantly destroying Nabistan's Fong, trying to let the sea of black mud flow through. Nabistan's Fong was not strong enough to withstand the attacks of these 5 monsters. Just the collision of their bodies was enough to destroy Nabistan's Fong. The sea of black mud began to move toward the Uruk, and some fragments of Nabistan's Fong that were scattered on the sea of black mud were picked up by one of the monsters. This was a huge bull with a pair of fierce horns. It was Catholic, one of the 11 sons of Tiamat. Obviously, even if Catholic transformed from his human form to his beast form, he was still the strongest among the 11 sons. No, it should be said that he was stronger in his beast form. He was holding a sharp fragment of Nabistan's Fong, and he suddenly threw his head toward the Uruk sky. Whoosh! The fragment rushed toward the Uruk at high speed like a bullet. When the fragment reached the highest point, it began to fall in an arc, and then directly entered the light film of the Uruk. It fell heavily in an open space, smashing a big hole. In the middle of the street, not far away, there's also a big hole, and in the hole was another fragment of Nabistan's Fong. Obviously, these 2 fragments had entered the Uruk through the same method. But fortunately, these 2 fragments happened to fall in an open space or even on the street, so there were no casualties. As for the humans in the Uruk, under the guidance of the soldiers, they were constantly retreating toward the central tower. A beautiful woman wearing a veil was saying something loudly. "Hurry up, everyone. We'll be safe once we enter the tower." This was Siduri, and she was also giving orders. The underground of the tower had space for thousands of people to temporarily take refuge. Although it was a little difficult to let everyone in the Uruk take refuge in it, the other rooms on the ground of the tower could also be used for refuge. As the central building of the Uruk, the tower was naturally strong. As long as they didn't hide on a floor that was too high, even if the fragment of Nabistan's Fong fell, it wouldn't cause any harm to the people hiding in it. At the thought that the people would soon be safe, Siduri couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. However, at this moment, a sound of something breaking through the air came from above Siduri's head. Siduri couldn't help but look up. It was another fragment of Nabistan's Fong, and the landing site was where she was. Chapter 10:19. However, before the fragment landed, a purple figure leaped towards the fragment. With a flash of a blade, the fragment turned into fragments and fell to the ground. "Are you all right?" Anna's figure landed in front of Siduri. Her scythe indicated that it was Anna who saved Siduri. "I'm fine, Miss Anna. Thank you so much." Siduri bowed to Anna to express her gratitude. "Let's leave quickly. The Uruk is in danger now." Anna blushed and turned her head away. She couldn't help but put on her hood. Yes, Miss Anna should be careful too. However, Siduri didn't retreat in the direction of the tower. Instead, she ran towards the crowd. She needed to guide the crowd. This was not only her duty as a witch chief, but also her duty as a human to help her fellow humans. Seeing that Siduri was covering some of the frightened crowd while leaving, Anna took off her hood. That's why I hate humans the most. However, Anna's heart was the complete opposite of what she said. However, she didn't have time to sigh. A few more fragments fell from the sky. Anna jumped up again and prepared to use her undying slaughter blade. Hepar to cut these fragments into pieces one by one. However, these were still fragments of Nabistan's Fong. It was difficult for Anna to cut them into pieces. However, if she didn't cut them into pieces, the fragments would destroy the surroundings and affect the people who hadn't retreated in time. Not good. Finally, something unexpected happened. A smaller fragment followed behind a larger one. Anna didn't notice it because she wasn't paying attention. Anna, who thought that she had cut the last fragment of Nabistan's Fong, was gradually falling to the ground. At this moment, a tiger's roar echoed through the sky. Roar! Kacha bang! Finally, the last piece of debris was completely shattered. Along with Anna, a yellow leopard fell to the ground. Although she made a tiger's roar. Humph, as expected, we still have to rely on the warriors of the forest. The great leopard man. Roar. Anna looked at the leopard man in disdain. She didn't say anything. After all, it was a fact that he helped her. Anna turned to look at the sky. It was definitely not a coincidence that the two fragments had overlapped. Anna was very sure of this. Then, there was only one explanation. The enemy's intelligence isn't lower than humans. As expected of Tiamat's magical beast, Gilgamesh said as he walked over with Enkidu, who was holding Funbaba. He and Enki both saw what happened just now, and he also saw that it was the doing of those 5 magic beasts. Because it's a pure physical attack, the light barrier didn't have any effect. It seems like the opponent is very clear about the defensive means of the light barrier. Gilgamesh couldn't help but frown. It wasn't scary that the enemy was strong. What was scary was that the enemy was strong and smart. At this moment, the 5 magical beasts outside were such enemies. The magical beasts this time are fundamentally different from the previous ones. Let's go. Follow this king to the city wall to take a look. As for the fragments falling from the sky, Gilgamesh had already activated a few divine power seals, Dinger, which were enough to destroy the fragments of Nabistan's fawn. Although the civilians and soldiers had entered the holy tower to take refuge, Gilgamesh could easily activate a few divine power seals, Dinger, by himself. He didn't need any soldiers. Plus, now that all the humans were gathered in the holy tower, even if 1 or 2 fragments fell, it wouldn't be a big deal. The only thing left was to take care of the 5 magical beasts that kept throwing fragments of Nabistan's fawn at the Uruk. Because the journey wasn't far, Gilgamesh and the others soon arrived at the city wall. The magical beasts probably realized that throwing fragments of Nabistan's fawn was no longer effective. Plus, they had basically used up all the fragments of Nabistan's fawn. Hence, the magical beasts completely gave up on the idea. However, more importantly, because of the damage to Nabistan's fawn, the sea of black mud had arrived in front of the Uruk. Although the light membrane protecting the Uruk was Wuming's noble artifact, the sea of black mud was created by Tiamat's authority. Even Gilgamesh doubted that the light membrane enveloping the Uruk could stop the sea of black mud. However, Gilgamesh believed that even if it couldn't stop it, it could still stop it for a while. As long as Wuming killed Tiamat in a while, everything would be fine. Sure enough, when the sea of black mud came into contact with the light membrane, the two seemed to have a chemical reaction. The light membrane sizzled and flashed like an alarm. Although the sea of black mud didn't enter the Uruk, it seemed that the light membrane wouldn't last long. However, at this moment, Gilgamesh and Enkidu suddenly sensed something and looked at somewhere in the sky in disbelief. There, a petite figure with a strong divinity suddenly appeared. Earthwave, accompanied by a delicate but firm voice, the ground around the Uruk suddenly changed. The soil outside the Uruk became active like an ocean. It directly cut off the sea of black mud from the ground and formed a trapezoidal dam, blocking the sea of black mud outside. The sea of black mud that was cut off between the Uruk and the dam was transported by the soil and thrown back. This divinity, Gilgamesh, showed an interesting expression. "It's Lord Hyunryong's," Enkidu said. However, compared to Gilgamesh, Enkidu was more familiar with the person who used this power. The petite figure in the sky was Wuming's younger sister, Shitsuki Mayu. On Wuming's side, Wuming, who didn't know about Mayo's arrival, was contending with the 6 magic beasts while covering for Gadatsi and the others as they left. Looking in the direction in which Gadatsi and the others left, Wuming could no longer see them. Only then did he look at the 6 magic beasts seriously. The magic beasts left behind to deal with Wuming were not simple. Kitabaru, Kuru, Umdabrutu, Basumu Uj, and Ramu. The first 5 magic beasts were among the strongest among the 11 magic beasts. However, Ramu caught Wuming's attention more. Apart from other reasons, the existence that was like a strengthened version of Ramu was like the center of the magic beasts. How could Wuming not pay attention to it? Moreover, when Gadotsi and the others left, Ramu just waved its hand lightly. Hundreds of winged Ramu flew out from the sea of black mud below and flew in the direction that Gadotsi and the others left. This guy actually had magic beasts that could fly. How could Wu Ming not be shocked? Chapter 10:20. It seemed that even if Wu Ming stayed behind, the other party still wouldn't allow anyone to get close to Tiamat. But fortunately, it was only some winged Ramu that dealt with Gadotsi and the others, and not the 11 magical beasts. Although those mass-produced Ramu weren't weak, they were still too weak compared to the 11 magical beasts, so Wu Ming believed that Gadotsi and the others would be fine. There were two reasons why Wu Ming let Gadotsi and the others deal with Tiamat. First of all, Gadotsi and the others definitely wouldn't be able to kill Tiamat. And Wu Ming instructed Ishtar to attack from a distance only to give Gadotsi and the others a way out. After all, it would be easier for them to escape by pulling the distance. And why did Wu Ming let Gadotsi and the others go even though he knew that they couldn't kill Tiamat? The second reason was that Wu Ming wanted to take advantage of this time to kill these 6 magical beasts. So no matter what, Wu Ming had to speed up during the time when Gadotsi and the others were away and try to kill these 6 magical beasts as quickly as possible. After all, it was impossible for them to defeat the magical beasts, and even the survival of Gadotsi and the others was a problem. So these 6 magical beasts must all be eliminated by Wu Ming. Even if they couldn't kill all of them, they had to leave a number that Gadotsi and the others could deal with before turning to deal with Tiamat. And next, Wu Ming had to use the power of God to deal with this group of children of the Creator. And the first to bear the brunt was Ramu. Fear the one with wings. Evil people and powerful people all fear me with wings. My wings will bring you curses. Evil people can't hit me. As the words were chanted, Wu Ming's figure suddenly disappeared. However, in the next second, Wu Ming's figure appeared in front of Ramu, who was standing among the other magical beasts. And Wu Ming had already stretched out his right hand and grabbed Ramu's head. The speed brought by the phoenix incarnation wasn't something that magical beasts could react to. After all, the phoenix incarnation was related to time, so how could it let the other party react? In an instant, Wu Ming came into contact with seraphic speed and chanted another word. I'm the strongest, and I hold all the victory in my hands. No matter if it's a human or a demon, I will defeat any enemy who is in my way. Poochie. Like crushing a watermelon, Lachmu's head, which Wu Ming was grabbing, was crushed by Wu Ming's arm, which was filled with the power of a giant. Purple blood splattered everywhere, but not a single drop landed on Wu Ming's body. Wu Ming had already set up a telekinesis wall in front of him. Roar, 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 roar. Ramu's sudden death scared the other magical beasts. In their senses, Wu Ming disappeared in an instant. Ramu's head exploded, and Wu Ming appeared among the 5 magical beasts. Giant with unparalleled divine power, please help me. With the words, a giant golden arm attached to Wu Ming's left hand. Then Wu Ming suddenly turned around and waved the giant golden arm around, and the 5 magical beasts were suddenly thrown out. Looking at the 5 magical beasts standing on the sea of black mud and surrounding Wu Ming turned off the giant incarnation, and the golden arm on his left hand disappeared. Thou hast violated the contract and brought evil to the world. Lord's Day, sinners will be punished. Then, holding Ramu's headless body, Wu Ming began to chant again. Crush its back, dig out its tendons, bones, hair, and brain, and trample on its blood and mud. If I am the one who cannot get close to the darkness, I will follow the words of the Lord and destroy thee. Suddenly, something like a black hole appeared on Ramu's headless body. In an instant, the body was sucked into the black hole and disappeared. Then, as if quite tired, Wu Ming shook his right hand. It must be said that Ramu's body was as tough as its appearance. It was far from being comparable to the mass-produced Ramu. Although Wu Ming easily crushed Ramu's head, it consumed a lot of Wu Ming's energy. Wu Ming's arm was also tired. Otherwise, Wuming would not have changed his arm to attack the other 5 magical beasts. Wuming did not underestimate the 11 magical beasts. On the contrary, they were very important. After all, they came out of the sea of black mud. Using the phoenix incarnation that had never been used in front of magical beasts to get close to Ramuh and catch it by surprise. Then, using the giant incarnation, coupled with a trace of the power of the source of the black mud, he successfully crushed Ramuh's head. Finally, he used the annihilation incarnation to destroy Ramuh's headless body. After all, a magical beast's vitality was very strong. However, Wuming could not guarantee that Ramuh did not have any special abilities. Wuming was afraid that the headless Ramuh could come back to life. These were enough to see Wuming's importance to Ramuh, and Ramuh died without playing any role. No, thinking about it carefully, it was still useful. The other 5 magical beasts knew about Wuming's methods. If Wuming wanted to use this method to kill other magical beasts, it would most likely not work. However, even so, it was worth it to kill Ramuh, who gave Wuming a sense of importance. Rubbing his right wrist, Wuming looked at Baxiumu. Baxiumu was his next target. After all, Wuming had 12 incarnations. When Wuming killed a magical beast, Gadatsi's side did not have any accidents as Wuming expected. Although the mass-produced Ramuh was powerful, and the mass-produced Ramuh with wings was even more powerful, they were still not as good as the 11 magical beasts. Probably because Quizzard and Ishtar couldn't beat the 11 magical beasts, the two of them worked extra hard to deal with these mass-produced Ramuh. Or it could be said that they were venting die. Ishtar frantically attacked the mass-produced Ramuh with anima. With a face full of resentment, she kept muttering this sentence. Although she couldn't hit Ramuh every time, as long as she hit Ramuh, the opponent would be killed. This was enough to prove that Ishtar put a lot of magic into each attack. And Quizzard used the mass-produced Ramuh as a stepping stone, constantly moving between the Ramuh. And every time Quizzard moved, a Ramuh would fall. These Ramuh were directly killed by Quizzard's fatal wrestling skills. 2 goddesses, so scary. Gadatsi and Matthew looked at Ishtar and Quizzard with some fear and gulped. Nuwakamaru and Yuzusobo Benkei quietly stayed on the pterosaur's back. Because the 2 goddesses were venting, although they didn't have a chance to attack, they had some free time. Aha! Almost all the enemies have been wiped out. Merlin laughed. Sure enough, after Merlin finished speaking, Gadatsi found that there was only 1 Ramuh left, and it seemed to be dumbfounded, flying there motionlessly. But it didn't matter. Anyway, this Ramuh had to face the 2 goddesses venting. When it finally reacted, it couldn't help but shudder. Then a golden light flashed, and it fell into darkness. Chapter 10:21. The last Ramuh died after being attacked by the 2 goddesses. Ishtar, who couldn't find a target, stopped shooting, and Quizzard, who also couldn't find a target, returned to the back of her pterosaur. At this moment, everyone flew side by side. I'm in a good mood, that's right, the 2 goddesses smiled like goddesses. Gadatsi and Matthew couldn't connect the 2 goddesses at this moment with the previous 2. Gadatsi simply changed the topic. I don't know how Assassin is doing. While talking, Gadatsi showed a trace of worry. After all, the 6 magical beasts were difficult to deal with for Ishtar and Quizzard, so it was natural for Gadatsi to be worried. Senpai, I believe that Senpai Villa will be fine. After all, he has always been very reliable. Matthew clenched his small fist and nodded to Gadatsi. In this regard, Ishtar also agreed. Matthew is right. That guy won't do anything that he isn't sure of. Since he chose to deal with the 6 magical beasts, he must have his reasons. Since Ishtar said so, I think Hyunryong will be fine. But I didn't expect you to have so much confidence in Hyunryong. Then Quizzard also interjected, but her tone was quite mocking. I don't have confidence in him. But if Hyunryong can be defeated so easily, I won't be unable to defeat him for so long in the past. Ishtar crossed her arms and looked proud. Everyone, now is not the time to quarrel. Nawakamaru said something, but her face was a little ugly. Similarly, Musasobo Benkei, who was still silent, also looked a little ugly. We probably have a problem. At this time, Merlin, who was on the back of the pterosaur next to Gadatsi, suddenly pointed to the front. His expression was a little ugly. There was no other reason than the place Merlin had pointed to. Gadatsi and others looked at the place where Merlin pointed. It was dark. The clouds in the sky gradually turned into dark clouds, and the sky gradually turned scarlet. Under the alternating black and red sky, the Indian Ocean connected to the Persian Gulf was dark. No, it wasn't the Indian Ocean, it was the black mud. The black mud connected the sky and the sea, not metaphorically, but a real connection. In front of everyone, from the surface of the sea to the black clouds in the sky, it was as if a wall of black mud had formed. All they could see was black mud and nothing else. In a sense, the water and the sky was black. Because the surrounding environment had been turning dark and Gadatsi and others' attention was attracted by Ishtar and Quizzard, they didn't notice this scene. The black mud that formed the water and the sky was faintly creeping. Anyway, in Gadatsi's opinion, it was quite disgusting. She now understood why Merlin frowned. After discovering this situation, Quizzard had already stopped the pterosaurs and even faintly retreated. Then, Roman's panicked voice came from Gadatsi's bracelet. Quizzard, retreat quickly. At that moment, Quizzard didn't care whether Roman's words were correct or not. She immediately waved her hand, and the pterosaurs made a sharp turn and flew backward. Gadatsi, who didn't react for a moment, even fell on Matthew due to inertia. Sitting up again, Gadatsi looked at her bracelet in confusion. "Doctor, what's wrong?" "That's right. They only saw the black mud that was the same color as the sky, and there was still some distance between them. Why were they in such a hurry to leave? It was as if the danger was already near them." "I don't know what you saw. Chaldea can't receive the image since you went deep into the Indian Ocean, but fortunately, the instrument is still working as usual." Roman, who was in Chaldea, wiped the sweat on his forehead that appeared out of nowhere and answered Gadatsi word by word. The instrument detected that there was a huge amount of magic everywhere around you just now. No, to be precise, you are in a space full of huge magic, and your surroundings are still like this. To make an analogy, you can imagine that you are in the Holy Grail, although the tone was also very serious. Even at a critical moment, Leonardo da Vinci still didn't forget to joke. Roman and Leonardo da Vinci's words made everyone recover from the shock, and then they were shocked again. What they realized was that the magic that was being emitted was probably the black mud around them, and the shock was easier to understand. "Look carefully, the distance around us seems to be dark." Ishtar frowned. The pterosaur had been flying behind them, but they didn't seem to have moved at all. If that's the case, Gadatsi's eyes widened. In the end, Quizzard said a guess that was likely to be the truth. "Maybe we have entered a special space like what Leonardo da Vinci said." They were shocked because they seemed to be trapped. On the coast of the Persian Gulf, Wuming, holding the holy sword, stood on a huge red-haired monster that looked like a wolf or a dog burning with holy flames. The reddish-yellow flames and the color of the monster reflected on Wuming, who was standing on top, and looked particularly sacred. After confirming that the body under him was cold, Wuming raised his hand and waved. The sword of salvation released a ray of light and shone on the body. In an instant, the flame transformed by the sun suddenly burned. He was going to use the flame to burn the body of the demonic beast. Every time Wuming killed a demonic beast, he would use various means to destroy the body to prevent them from suddenly resurrecting. Then, Wuming could not help but look at the direction where Gadatsi and the others left. It has been so long. Why hasn't Ishtar activated her noble phantasm? There was still a connection between Ishtar and Wuming. Once Ishtar activated her noble phantasm, Wuming could easily feel it. Wuming, who felt that something was not right, was a little uneasy. It seems that there is no time to deal with the remaining 2 demonic beasts. That's right, Wuming did not kill the 6 demonic beasts. After Wuming killed Ramu, he successively killed Baksumu, Umdabrutu, and Yalidim. Only Musamafu and Kururu were left. Kururu could fly. which meant that it was more agile than Baxamu and the rest. Musamafu, on the other hand, was cunning and cherished his life. After Wu Ming killed Baxamu, he hid in the sea of black mud. Even if he attacked Wu Ming, he would only feign an attack as a cover. After that, he would immediately dive into the depths of the sea of black mud, allowing Omudau, Yalidim, and Kurulu to take charge of the main attacks. After killing Mdabrutu, the remaining two demonic beasts, Kuru and Yalidim, panicked. The body under Wu Ming that was about to burn out was Yalidim's. Chapter 1022. Wu Ming took advantage of the moment when Yalidim and Kuru were in a panic and captured Yalidim in one fell swoop. After fighting for a while, he directly used the Sun Incarnation as his trump card to kill Yalidim. But unfortunately, Kuru also took the opportunity to sneak into the sea of black mud, and Musamafa no longer appeared after Wu Ming killed Mdablutu. It was estimated that Musamafu had sneaked into a deeper place. At this moment, the sea of black mud still had some influence on Wu Ming, so Wu Ming couldn't go deep into the sea of black mud to find Musamafu and Kuru. In addition, Wu Ming noticed that something was wrong with Gadatsi, so he decided to let the two monsters go for the time being. He was going to see what happened to Gadatsi and Kuru first. However, at this moment, something unexpected happened to Wu Ming. The black-purple portal that was under his control suddenly opened automatically beside him. This made Wu Ming shocked and puzzled. Wu Ming learned this move from the game system when he transmigrated to another world. In other words, the portal was a unique move. Wu Ming also taught Demetrius the move system of Yggdrasil, but because Demetrius was a servant, Wu Ming couldn't be sure whether Demetrius had mastered the magic system of Yggdrasil. However, even if Demetrius had mastered it, she also promised Wu Ming that she wouldn't spread out. So who opened the portal that appeared in front of Wu Ming? In the next second, Wu Ming got the answer. Brother Wu Ming? A delicate and excited voice came out from the portal, and then a black-haired, white-robed figure rushed into Wu Ming's arms from the portal. Wu Ming instantly understood who came and hugged the person in his arms and rubbed her little head. The person who came was naturally Wu Ming's cute sister, Shitsuki Meiyu. Meiyu? Why are you here? Wu Ming was both puzzled and shocked. This was a singularity, and it was Mesopotamia in BC. Meiyu couldn't have come here. As for whether it was true or not, when Meiyu shouted, "Brother Wu Ming knew that the Meiyu in his arms was not someone else. It was Brother Wu Ming's power that brought me here. Meiyu's cheeks were slightly red because of Wu Ming's touch, but she still enjoyed it, like a kitten. When Meiyu said this, Wu Ming suddenly realized that he did give his power to Meiyu. After Wu Ming got rid of Darius, the world of Meiyu and Ilya was safe. After that, Wu Ming left that world and used the black mud to find Gidia. When he left, Wu Ming asked the young Gilgamesh to give Meiyu the rank card with his power. It was a golden caster, magician, rank card. Although the crisis in Wu Ming's world had been solved by Wu Ming, and Meiyu would not have any trouble, Wu Ming still left his power to Meiyu just in case. After that, because of a series of involuntary things, Wu Ming was a little busy. During this time, he did not go back to see Meiyu. Wu Ming also gradually forgot that he gave Meiyu the rank card. My rank card suddenly became hot, and then I felt the summoning from the rank card. I thought it was Brother Wu Ming calling me, so I responded to the summoning. As a result, I appeared next to the blonde Rin in Osaka. God knows what Meiyu's expression was when she saw the blonde Rin in Osaka with Wu Ming's aura. Anyway, Meiyu only remembered that she was completely dumbfounded at the time. When Meiyu said this, Wu Ming understood everything. It was probably because Ereshkigal created a chain of summoning when she merged with Wu Ming's divinity. She inadvertently contacted Meiyu, who held Wu Ming's rank card, and Meiyu thought it was Wu Ming calling her. As a result, she came over in a daze. At this moment, Meiyu is a servant's body composed of a rank card and a spirit core, which was somewhat similar to Little Black. Little Black had already installed a magic converter in her body, and now she didn't need to rely on others to replenish her mana. But after all, she still had the body of a servant, unlike the body of an ordinary primary school student like Ilya and Mayu. In the past, Wuming didn't have any means. Now, Wuming could use the power of the Source to create a puppet body for Little Black that was 100% similar to the body of a primary school student. Mayu's human body should still be in her world. Even if something happened to Mayu in Wuming's arms, it wouldn't affect Mayu's body. At most, it would cause the rank card to be scrapped. However, Wuming wouldn't let anything happen to Mayu. And the other party isn't Rin in Osaka. She just borrowed Rin in Osaka's appearance. Remember to call her Sister L. Wuming knocked Mayu's little head. I know, Brother Wuming. Don't knock my head all the time. Wuming didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He rubbed Mayu's little head again, comforting Mayu's depression of being knocked on the head. You said you appeared next to Ereshkigal. How is Ereshkigal now? Wuming was quite worried about Ereshkigal. Blonde-haired Rin in Osaka. Sister L is now dealing with the demonic beasts in Uruk. She asked me to come and find Brother Wuming to see if there's anything I can help with. However, Wuming had a strange expression. Are you sure Ereshkigal didn't ask you to come and find me to save the day? Wuming almost said this sentence. Can Ereshkigal defeat those 5 demonic beasts? Although Wuming asked cautiously, there was still distrust in his words. It couldn't be helped. Quizzard and Ishtar would have a problem surviving against any one of the demonic beasts. How could Ereshkigal defeat 5 demonic beasts? Mayu pouted and was a little dissatisfied. Brother Wuming, don't underestimate Sister L. She directly locked the 5 demonic beasts in the underworld. Immediately, Mayu described the whole process of the 5 demonic beasts attacking the Uruk. When the sea of black mud rushed to the Uruk, Mayu cast the Servant in the class card, which was Wuming's ability, Yggdrasil Systems magic. She raised the ground and intercepted the sea of black mud. After that, Ereshkigal, who received Wuming's divinity, got rid of the restrictions of the underworld and came to the ground. However, Ereshkigal still had a trace of her own divinity, so the underworld still protected Ereshkigal. She successfully launched her underworld authority and locked the 5 demonic beasts in her own underworld. In the underworld, Ereshkigal could be said to be invincible. The 5 demonic beasts were lambs waiting to be slaughtered. However, Wuming was not optimistic about Ereshkigal. After all, these demonic beasts emerged from the sea of black mud, and the essence of the sea of black mud was the black mud, which was the same as Wuming's. Since the 5 demonic beasts were likely not to be suppressed by the underworld, Ereshkigal was in danger. Chapter 10:23. Wuming waved his hand, and a clay tablet unique to Uruk appeared in his hand. The clay tablet was covered with Lune runes, and these runes stored the words that Wuming wanted to say. Mayu, immediately bring this to Gilgamesh, and then look for Ereshkigal. Those demonic beasts are not ordinary demonic beasts, and I'm worried that she might have an accident. After Wuming finished speaking, he handed the clay tablet to Mayu. Understand, Brother Wuming. Mayu nodded with a serious expression. Mayu, who had Wuming's class card, was equivalent to Wuming in the state of caster, magician. Her magic power was almost infinite, and she had mastered Lune magic and Yggdrasil magic. She also had a huge amount of divinity and a dragon's breath, and some of Wuming's noble artifacts. Not to mention fighting against enemies, she had no problem protecting herself. In addition, Mayu was a serious and strict child, so Wuming was very relieved to let Mayu handle this matter. What is Brother Wuming going to do? Mayu asked abruptly, and she seemed a little nervous. Knowing that Mayu was worried about his Wuming, Wuming could not help but smile, and then he put his hand on Mayu's head. Don't worry, I'm just going to solve a small problem. After this matter is over, don't be in a hurry to go back. Stay in Uruk, and I'll make omelet rice for you alone. That's right, Wuming was going to give Mayu special treatment. Although Mayu was a little embarrassed to leave Ilya and Little Black to eat alone, when she thought that she could have Wuming to herself, Mayu was secretly delighted. Well, I'm waiting for Brother Wuming to make omelet rice for me in Uruk. After saying that with a blush on her cheeks, Mayu opened the portal and went in. In this regard, Wu Ming showed a warm expression. Sure enough, Mayu has always been very sensible. It was not the matter of making omelet rice for Mayu. Wu Ming's sensible was that Mayu did not ask much. Anyone could tell that the situation was not good just by looking around. Although it was not a certain death, the dark doomsday scene of the sky and sea was still very unsettling. However, Mayu did not ask anything. She did not ask what was going on here, nor did she ask why Wu Ming said anything. She only listened to her brother's words, listened to Wu Ming's words, and did what Wu Ming told her to do. She was completely like an obedient sister who listened to her brother's words. Or perhaps this was Mayu's mature side. If it were Little Black, he might not be as good as Mayu. If it were Ilya, it would definitely be worse. Ilya would most likely get to the bottom of it. If she did not do that, Ilya would definitely be distracted or absent-minded. As if imagining Ilya's embarrassed look, Wu Ming could not help but smile. For the sake of Beauty Tour, for the sake of Ilya and Blackie who aren't here, I have to work harder. After Wu Ming finished speaking, he landed on the black mud sea and sat on the surface of the sea. First of all, I need to confirm whether Gadatsi and the others are safe. As Wu Ming said, he raised his arm and turned the back of his hand to himself. Some red marks were clearly visible on the back of Wu Ming's hand, which was the magic power crystal of Ishtar's command spell that had been used up before. Although it was said to be a command spell, it did not have most of the effects of a command spell. It only had the effect of replenishing the magic power of the servant. Moreover, after these command spells were used up, they could be replenished through the magic power in the body, but they had not been used, so Wu Ming did not replenish them. And now it was the time to use them. Wu Ming's raised hand suddenly clenched into a fist. The originally sparse red marks on the back of his hand suddenly solidified, forming 3 scarlet command seals that resembled a bow and arrow, yet also resembled a pair of wings. Wu Ming replenished his magic power. After that, Wu Ming began to issue orders to Ishtar. By the command curse, O goddess of fertility and war, restore your magic power to full. By command spell, mistress of heaven, restore your magic power. By the command of the curse, Ishtar, release your noble phantoms and break through the predicament. That's right, Wu Ming used all the command spells in one breath. Although there were 3 command spells, their function was only to replenish Ishtar's magic power. The first command was to replenish Ishtar's magic power. The second command was to make Ishtar's body overflow with magic power. The third command was to make Ishtar's magic power so much that it was completely out of control, to the extent that it would cause a big explosion if left alone. In this way, the effect of Ishtar's noble phantoms would be several times the original, or even more than 10 times. After all, this was not a game. Doubling was not just multiplying by 2, and multiplying by several times was not just multiplying by several. In this way, Wu Ming believed that Ishtar's noble phantoms would be able to affect the surrounding environment. With this, Wu Ming would be able to find them. Sure enough, a few seconds after Wu Ming gave the 3 orders, a light that resembled a falling star appeared in a certain direction. Then, there was a big explosion. On Gadatsi's side, after the big explosion caused by Ishtar's noble phantoms, Matthew put away his noble phantoms, revealing a few pterosaurs and a few people on their backs. Just now, everyone was still thinking of a way to get out, but Ishtar suddenly panicked and shouted for Hyunryong. Then, she released her noble phantoms that seemed to be many times stronger. After Ishtar's attack was released from Anna's horse, Matthew also activated his noble phantoms and successfully blocked in front of everyone, blocking the aftershock. TSK, TSK, TSK. Ishtar is indeed powerful. She can release such a powerful attack. Merlin sighed as he watched from the side. He did not care about what Ishtar, who was lying on Gadatsi's pterosaur, was thinking. Damn it, Hyunryong. Ishtar wanted to look ferocious, but she was too tired to do so. She even stuttered when she spoke. Ms. Ishtar, are you all right? Matthew looked at Ishtar with concern. However, Gadotsi interrupted. Matthew, you blocked the big explosion just now. Are you hurt? Matthew shook his head. I'm fine, Senior. Ms. Ishtar's noble phantoms were launched far away. I only blocked the aftershock. But just the aftershock alone scared me. Quizzard was the one who spoke now. I didn't expect Ishtar to release such a powerful attack. If there were levels, Ishtar's attack could be categorized as EX. It's all virtuous. Dragon. That guy. Ugh. Ishtar tilted her head and stopped talking. She was so tired that she couldn't take it anymore. Ishtar's body almost exploded after 3 times of mana replenishment. If Ishtar did not release her noble phantoms quickly, Gadotsi and the rest would have been dead by now. Even after releasing her noble phantoms, Ishtar did not feel good. She was still weak. Therefore, it was not unreasonable for Ishtar to gnash his teeth at Wuming. Chapter 10:24. His Excellency Hyunryong must be looking for us, Musasobo Benkei said. It could only be said that Wu Ming was worthy of the existence of the new army. Not only did Wu Ming understand, but Nyoruan also understood Wu Ming's intention early on. His Excellency Hyunryong is right. If not, we wouldn't have found the exit. Following Nuwakamuru's gaze, a gap appeared in front of them. Unlike the other places, light shone through the gap. They were indeed trapped, but Ishtar's noble phantasm forcefully blasted a hole in the black mud. Not only did Wuming get them out of danger, but he could also tell Wuming where they were. It was killing 2 birds with 1 stone. Even Ishtar could only keep her dissatisfaction to herself. It was precisely because Wuming's action was correct that Ishtar, who did not have the moral high ground, could not find trouble with Wuming afterwards. Although she was the mistress of the sky, Ishtar, who had suffered a lot in the hands of Wuming, understood one thing. If she were to find trouble with Wuming, she could still save some face. However, if she were to find trouble with Wuming, she would definitely be tricked by Wuming, just like when she was in the underworld. Let's hurry up and leave, Gadotsi suggested. If there were any accidents later, they would be in trouble. However, that was how trouble would come about. Suddenly, the entire space began to shake. Whether it was the sky, the sea, or even the walls that connected the sky and the sea, everything shook and a black substance began to fall. The sharp-eyed Quizzard was able to immediately tell that the black substance was black mud. Quizzard immediately ordered the pterosaurs. Quick, pterosaurs, head there at full speed. A few pterosaurs flew in the direction of the gap. They were so fast that Gadotsi had to hold on tightly to their backs. However, the black mud was falling faster and faster. Gradually, the entire space looked like it was raining black mud. The raindrops were the size of fists. Fortunately, the gap between the raindrops was large and it was not a rainstorm yet. Therefore, they could continue to fly over on the pterosaurs. However, because the pterosaur was jumping up and down and swaying left and right to avoid the rain of black mud, Gadotsi almost couldn't catch it. Fortunately, Mashu was there to help Gadotsi. She didn't let Gadotsi fall down, nor did she let Gadotsi touch the black mud. However, everyone could see that the raindrops were getting bigger and denser. At this moment, the pterosaurs were still halfway to the exit. Although everyone knew that they could not touch the black mud, Quizzard could not help but say, "Everyone, don't get touched by the black mud." However, now that the volume and frequency of the raindrops had increased, it was too difficult to not get stained by the black mud. The first accident happened. Gah! The pterosaur that Nuwakamaru and Musasobo Benkei were riding on was dripped by a drop of the black mud and let out a scream. Then, the entire pterosaur flew around uncontrollably and even collided with several drops of rain. Lady Nuwakamaru, don't worry about me, Mi-Chin. Nuwakamaru and Musasobo Benkei's panicked voices came from the pterosaur. Lady Nuwakamaru, Mr. Mi-Chin, Matthew shouted nervously. Whoosh! Suddenly, countless petals flew to Nuwakamaru and Musasobo Benkei's pterosaur. It was as if the pterosaur was frozen in place and became quiet. The rain, that fell from the sky seemed to have encountered some resistance and was blocked by the petals. In the next second, Merlin flew over on the pterosaur while Musasobo Benkei and Nuwakamaru took the opportunity to jump onto Merlin's pterosaur. Piedra del Sol. The Quetzalcoatl god had released the real phantasm of the Piedra Almanac that was originally in the Temple of Eridu. Although Eric Metropolis was drowned by the sea of black mud, the Piedra god had summoned the Piedra Almanac to her side before Eric Metropolis was drowned. As for the size, it was Quizzard's phantasm and could be changed at will. Flames and lava emerged from a fiery red stone in Quizzard's hand and formed a semicircular protective shield. Quizzard raised it above her head. "Everyone come on my side." The protective shield of flames and lava blocked the rain above Quizzard's head and was wide enough to protect the others. The pterosaur that Gadatsi and the others were riding on immediately flew over. Everyone immediately flew toward the gap without stopping. After all, it was better to leave as soon as possible. The pterosaur that was stained by the rain fell into the darkness below as if it had died. After they were safe, Musasobo Benkei took the lead to ask about Nuwakamaru's safety. "Lady Nuwakamaru, are you okay?" Nuwakamaru half knelt on the pterosaur's back and shook his head to show that he was fine. "Di Ching, no. Ocean Lord, it's all thanks to you this time." Nuwakamaru knew that she was almost stained by the black mud. Although it was just a little bit of black mud, who knew how the black mud eroded? Was it instant assimilation? Or did it need time? No one knew, and no one would try. "What are you talking about, Nuwakamaru? As long as you're okay." Musasobo Benkei, who was half kneeling on the pterosaur's back, lowered his head silently, as if he was dead. This gave Nuwakamaru a shock. Similarly, Gadatsi and Matthew, who were on the pterosaur's back, were also shocked. Mr. Di Ching, Quizzard, who was using her noble artifact, and Ishtar, who was exhausted, did not have time to care. However, Merlin, who was riding on the same pterosaur as Musasobo Benkei and Nuwakamaru, seemed to have noticed something and squinted his eyes. However, Musasobo Benkei lowered his head and spoke. "Lady Nuwakamaru, I have something to ask of you." Hearing Musasobo Benkei's voice, Nuwakamaru was relieved. "What's the matter?" As long as he was not dead, everything was fine. "Can I ask you to die?" After Musasobo Benkei finished speaking, he instantly got up and slashed at Nuwakamaru with his Bicento. "What?" Gadatsi and Matthew widened their eyes when they saw this scene. They could not react at all. Not only them, but even Nuwakamaru could not react. After all, Nuwakamaru did not expect Musasobo Benkei to assassinate him. This was not a dereliction of duty as a general on the battlefield. Instead, it was natural for him to lower his guard around someone close to him. However, the attack was still blocked. Clank! The holy sword that looked like an authentic item blocked the sharp-she blade, making a piercing sound. The one who blocked the attack was naturally Merlin, who was next to Nuwakamaru. He had just noticed that something was wrong with Musasobo Benkei. "Sure enough, you have been assimilated by the black mud." Chapter 1025. Following Merlin's words, everyone looked at Musasobo Benkei, who was holding his Bicento and preparing to slash. Musasobo Benkei's skin was originally the color of a dead person, and his thick eyelids were not something a normal person could have. But at this moment, Musasobo Benkei did not look like a normal person. Black lines could be vaguely seen on Musasobo Benkei's skin like tattoos, and a chaotic aura filled Musasobo Benkei's body. And at the back of Musasobo Benkei's neck, there was an obvious black mark. It was the mark of the black mud after it dried up. There was no doubt that he had been stained by the black mud when the pterosaur lost control. I didn't expect the black mud to be able to assimilate instantly. Merlin frowned, then used his sword to lift Musasobo Benkei's Bicento, then stabbed at Musasobo Benkei. However, Musasobo Benkei jumped off the pterosaur's back and stood on something black, bathing in the rain of black mud. It was a pterosaur, a black pterosaur. It was the pterosaur that had fallen below and was eroded by the black mud. This is really surprising. I didn't expect Sir Merlin's swordsmanship to be so outstanding. Merlin's move was not easy to block, so Musasobo Benkei chose to retreat. Senior, please be careful. Matthew, who reacted at this moment, immediately held a shield in front of Gadatsi and Ishtar and looked warily at Musasobo Benkei, who was standing on the black pterosaur. Quizzard knew what had happened, but she did not move and maintained her lava shield. However, the pterosaurs collectively sped up again. They had to leave the range of the rain of black mud first, or they would be in an extremely disadvantageous situation no matter what they did. Musasobo Benkei went from the pterosaur lost control due to the black mud to assassinating Nuwakamaru in less than 10 seconds. There was no doubt that he had been assimilated by the black mud or Tiamat's authority in these 10 seconds or even shorter. To be honest, this assimilation speed scared Quizzard. How could there be such an exaggerated ability in this world? Quizzard did not know that Tiamat's ability was most likely strengthened by the black mud, so she could only be amazed. He wasn't sure if the assimilation speed had anything to do with one's strength, but he was afraid that he would be done for once he was infected. Therefore, he had to leave the range of the rain of black mud. However, the black pterosaur at the same speed, at the same time, the pterosaur was not far behind Nuwakamaru's. At this moment, Nyoruowan spoke. When Nuwakamaru's state of mind was unusually good. She did not break down because of Musasobo Benkei's assimilation. Instead, she talked to him very calmly. Merlin silently took a few steps back, leaving space for Musasobo Benkei and Nuwakamaru to talk. The moment I asked you about your situation, I felt the existence of Mother. That is the supreme truth, the true Buddhist kingdom that saves all living beings from suffering. When he said this, Musasobo Benkei was clearly a little excited. No, it should be crazy. Lord Nuwakamaru, I want you to return to Mother's embrace with them, and you should be in front of them. Unfortunately, you were stopped by Sir Merlin. As if he had really missed something important, Musasobo Benkei shook his head regretfully. Stay here and let this penniless monk send you to see Mother. With that, Musasobo Benkei raised his hand and grasped the gap. Countless black mud filled the gap. The gap began to heal quickly. At this moment, Musasobo Benkei could actually control the black mud. This gave everyone a fright. It was not easy to open a gap in this black mud space. Once it closed, who knew how to get out? It was hard to say whether Wuming could find him again. Everyone come my side. Quizzard called out to the crowd. Merlin was the first to jump onto Quizzard's pterosaur. Then, Nuwakamaru jumped onto Gadatsi and came to Quizzard's side with Matthew, who was carrying Ishtar. Feathered serpent god pterosaur, full speed ahead. Quizzard's pterosaur that everyone was riding suddenly accelerated and tried to speed out with the other pterosaurs that were following closely behind. However, Musasobo Benkei smiled slightly. You can't get out. I'll wait for you here. Indeed, as Musasobo Benkei said, when everyone was still a short distance away from the gap was almost closed. However, just when everyone was helpless, a black-purple ripple suddenly appeared in front of the pterosaurs that were flying at high speed. The pterosaurs, Gadatsi, and the others plunged into it, and the portal immediately closed. Seeing this scene, Musasobo Benkei could not help but frown. His Excellency Hyunryong? At this point, the gap was completely closed without a single gap. A second ago, in the world outside the gap, Wuming floated in the air and opened the portal. In an instant, a few pterosaurs that were not small flew out. Then, Wuming instantly closed the portal. I finally found you. Wuming looked at Gadatsi and the others who were on the pterosaur's back. Assassin, you're finally here. Gadatsi's face lit up with joy. I arrived just in time. If I was any later, I wouldn't have been able to save you. When Wuming arrived, he happened to see Gadatsi and the others flying toward him in the darkness. He saw that there was a gap that was rapidly closing, so Wuming directly opened a portal on the path that the pterosaurs had to pass through. That was how he managed to save Gadatsi and the others. I understand the situation now. You guys can return to Uruk first. Leave the rest to me. When Wuming saw Musasobo Benkei standing on the back of a black pterosaur, he guessed that he was probably assimilated by the black mud. However, just when Gadatsi and Matthew wanted to say something, Merlin suddenly became serious. Are you ready? I'm ready. This was Wuming's answer, and he was quite certain. Then I'll leave it to you. In this regard, Wuming did not say anything and only nodded. Gadatsi and Matthew also shut their mouths and did not speak again. I won't leave. I want to stay. Nawakamaru suddenly interrupted rather calmly. Without a doubt, she chose to stay because of Musasobo Benkei. You might die. Wuming answered her simply. I'm sorry, Your Excellency Hyunryong. I made up my mind. Wuming nodded. Since her attitude had already reached this point, he did not need to persuade her anymore. Ms. Nawakamaru, Nyoto Gadatsi and Matthew did not know what to say and looked worried. On the contrary, Nawakamaru was quite optimistic. Your Excellency Fujimaru, Your Excellency Matthew, take care. The three of them looked at each other and nodded. After that, Quizzard spoke again. This is for you. She stretched out her hand, and there was a fiery red stone in her hand that seemed to be burning. This was the noble phantasm that Quizzard had just cast, the solar ephemeris, Piedra del Sol. This noble phantasm is activated by the solar ephemeris. It can be said that it's a one-time use noble phantasm. After it's activated, it won't be deactivated, so I want to give it to you to use up. I should have used this trick earlier. Then, your subordinates wouldn't have been in trouble. Quizzard said, as if she was blaming herself. In this regard, Nawakamaru shook his head. It's not your fault, Your Excellency Quizzard. The rain of black mud was getting more and more difficult to dodge, so it was not an accident that it was hit. Moreover, this was a one-time use noble phantasm, so it must be kept for critical occasions. What's more, Quizzard immediately used this noble phantasm when there was an accident just now. It was obvious that she was not someone who did not know the severity of the situation. At this moment, Quizzard wanted to give this activated noble phantasm to Nawakamaru and let Nawakamaru use it up. I'll take it. After that, Nawakamaru's hand held the solar ephemeris. Chapter 10:26. Wuming opened the portal to Uruk and let Gadatsi and the others go back. Before they left, Ishtar, who had recovered a bit of strength, complained to Wuming, as if Wuming had done something to her. After closing the portal quickly, Wuming looked at Nawakamaru, who was not present. At this moment, Nawakamaru's right hand was clenched into a fist, and smoke was coming out of it. That was the sign that the solar ephemeris was causing damage to Nawakamaru's body, or rather, the spirit base. You really don't have to do this. Wuming spoke again, although he knew it was useless. The ocean venerable followed me to the end this time, so I can't leave him behind. Then, Nawakamaru changed the topic. By the way, Sir Hyunryong, have you prepared your trump card? Wuming nodded and looked in the direction he came from. Almost, but I still have something to do, and you're here. What Wuming meant was that Nawakamaru could help Wuming complete this matter. Please tell me, sir. I will not hesitate to go through water and tread on fire. At this moment, Nawakamaru was like a loyal warrior, waiting for the king's order. Wuming smiled at this. It's not that serious. I just need you to force Tiamat out. Force her out? Nawakamaru was stunned. What should she do? And Wuming looked at her hand, or rather, the solar ephemeris in her hand. I need you to burn the black mud. On the other side, on the sea of black mud, Wuming sat cross-legged on the sea with his eyes closed, as if waiting for something. However, Wuming's shaking fingers showed that Wuming was not just waiting. He was constructing a tactic to summon his trump card. That trump card was not his noble phantasm. He needed the help of Kalis, who was in the route, to complete the summoning of this trump card. The reason why Kalis did not say much was that she was focusing on perfecting this trump card. The one who went to rescue Gadatsi and the others was Wuming's doppelganger, which was transformed from a dependent. Except for the only weapon that could not be replicated, Wuming's doppelganger had 100% of Wuming's strength. Other than saving Gadatsi and the others, Wuming's clone had another mission. Wu Ming's trump card still needed a primer before it could be used. Only when Tiamat truly appeared would he be able to use it. Thus, luring out Tiamat was another mission of the doppelganger. Coincidentally, Quizzard had given the solar almanac to Nawakamaru, so Wu Ming's doppelganger did not need to do anything else other than use the solar almanac to burn the black mud. Although there was no way to completely burn the black mud, Wu Ming speculated that as long as a part of it was burned, Tiamat would definitely appear. Wu Ming guessed that this black mud was most likely something that belonged to Tiamat's body. Thus, as long as a part of it was burned, Tiamat would definitely appear. Wu Ming, on the other hand, only needed to wait quietly and design a supportive tactic. Suddenly, the eastern side of the sky turned red, and the light of the fire soared. It was obvious that Nawakamaru had begun to use the solar almanac to burn the sea of black mud. And it was also at this moment that the entire sea of black mud, as well as the space of black mud in the southeast where Gadatsi and the others had been trapped, began to produce powerful magical fluctuations. And along with this powerful magical fluctuation, Wu Ming's trump card, which he had prepared long ago, also began to form a connection with this world. Is Tiamat about to come out? Wu Ming opened his eyes and looked in the southwest direction, then looked at the sea of black mud beneath him and took a deep breath. The moment had finally arrived. Wu Ming was about to activate this trump card that had been born out of a sudden whim. Let's begin, Kalas. Yes, master. After the conversation, Wu Ming's body seemed to have given up all resistance and accepted the gravitational force, sinking directly into the sea of black mud. On the other side of Wu Ming's clone, Nawakamaru fell into the sea of black mud, and the solar almanac in her hand burned the black mud around her. The black mud dissipated at a speed visible to the naked eye, but this could be said to be harmless to the sea of black mud. However, calling out Tiamat only required a little stimulation. Whether or not the black mud could evaporate was not within Wu Ming's consideration. It was just like how mosquitoes sucking blood would not cause much harm to humans, but humans would always react when they realized that their blood was being sucked. Feeling the increasingly turbulent magical power around him, Wu Ming's clone nodded silently, then waved his hand and opened a teleportation portal beside Nawakamaru. That's enough, Nawakamaru. Return to Uruk. What's next is not something you can handle. Wu Ming shouted at Nawakamaru. Nawakamaru's spiritual base was gradually collapsing as she released a relic that did not belong to her. If this were to continue, there was no doubt that she would leave. Wu Ming did not want to kill Nawakamaru. However, Nawakamaru did not seem to hear what Wu Ming said as she continued to release the flames and lava from the solar almanac. Nawakamaru's face was a little twisted. It seemed like Nawakamaru's mental state was not very good, and she was probably on the verge of turning evil. Wu Ming controlled the teleportation portal to swallow Nawakamaru, leaving the solar almanac alone. Wu Ming's clone went to the solar almanac and held it with one hand, injecting a large amount of magical power into it. Since it was a one-time relic, Wu Ming's clone decided to inject magical power into it before the relic lost its function completely until the solar almanac could no longer take it or dissipate it. The solar almanac was getting more and more ferocious as it received an endless supply of magical power. Countless flames and lava were surging as if they were going to destroy the world, constantly devouring the sea of black mud. This time, it was no longer a mosquito bite, but a venomous worm bite. Then, before the solar almanac could self-destruct, the entire sea of black mud went berserk. Like a deep-sea monster that appeared from the ocean, the sea of black mud soared into the sky like a dragon sucking in water. It was so fast, and its range was so wide that it was shocking. Wu Ming's clone, who was in the range, escaped through the teleportation portal at the last moment with the solar almanac and arrived at where Wu Ming was previously. The two places were quite far apart, and the sea there was only shaking. Wu Ming's clone exclaimed as he watched the sky and water turn dark. It's a little sudden, but this proves that Tiamat is panicking. The solar almanac's movement earlier was considered to have hurt Tiamat. Otherwise, the sea of black mud would not have such a huge movement. After all, It was a one-time relic of the South American master god. After receiving Wu Ming's massive magical power, even Tiamat could not be unaffected. Wu Ming raised his hand and looked at the solar almanac that was about to burn out. He made a decision. It's time for you to fulfill your final mission. Wu Ming weighed it and then threw it to the place where the sky and water were so dark that he could not see the situation clearly. In the next second, the solar almanac was like the sun that shone on everything, releasing its last ray of light in the sky. A gigantic dragon beast that was many times bigger than the 11 demonic beasts earlier was standing there with its eyes closed. That was Tiamat. Chapter 10:27. Tiamat's body was covered with black mud. At a glance, it was pitch black without any extra color. Her four limbs were on the ground in the posture of a beast, and only her mouth was faintly visible with an exaggerated degree of crack. This oppressive feeling, as expected of the goddess of creation. Wu Ming's doppelganger's tone was full of emotion. It couldn't be helped. Anyone who saw this scene would feel the same way, such as Gadatsi and the others who were far away in Uruk. Because of Wu Ming's vigilance, the 5 magical beasts trapped in Ereshkigal's underworld didn't do anything. After Mayu brought the letter to Gilgamesh, Gilgamesh allowed Mayu to take part of the combat power to the underworld to investigate. After that, Mayu took Engidu, Funbaba, and Zhuge Kong Ming, who rarely came out, to the underworld. According to Zhuge Kong Ming's idea, he restudied the seal of divine right, Dinger, and wanted to find a magical beast to test it out. The 5 magical beasts were indeed, as Wu Ming said. The underworld didn't restrict them. Ereshkigal almost failed. Fortunately, Mayu arrived with reinforcements, and Zhuge Kong Ming's new seal of divine right, Dinger, was also verified. The price was that the 5 magical beasts died. After that, Ereshkigal didn't continue to stay in the underworld, and Zhuge Kong Ming also didn't stay in the house. At this moment, everyone, including Ereshkigal and Zhuge Kong Ming, and those who returned to Uruk, gathered on the southwest city wall, looking at Tiamat's figure in the distance, which was illuminated by the solar calendar stone. Although a large sea of black mud formed Tiamat's body, there was still a large sea of black mud spreading on the ground, and it didn't seem to decrease at all. That's Tiamat. Gadatsi's throat moved. Obviously, she was surprised and afraid of Tiamat. Even Quizzard, Ishtar, Ereshkigal, and other goddesses felt a trace of fear. It was enough to show how powerful Tiamat's deterrence was. Tiamat appeared in the depths of the Persian Gulf, which was the Indian Ocean region. It was thousands of miles away from Uruk City. However, even so, because of Tiamat's huge body, Gadatsi and the others could see Tiamat from Uruk. Before this, everyone in Uruk was ordered by Gilgamesh to stay in their homes or temporary residences to pray. They were not allowed to go out and ignore anything that happened outside. Therefore, Tiamat's appearance didn't cause any panic among the humans in Uruk. That's right. That huge dragon beast is the creation mother of Mesopotamia, Tiamat. Merlin walked to the front as a commentator. Tiamat's body was used to create the world, which means that her body must be huge. However, this size is beyond my imagination. Roman's sarcastic voice came from Gadatsi's bracelet. However, now wasn't the time to talk about this, right? How are they going to fight such a huge Tiamat god? Doctor, can you still track Assassin's location? Before thinking about how to fight Tiamat, Gadatsi was first worried about Wu Ming. No, it's too far away. Plus, the black mud has a disruptive effect. There's no way to detect Hyunryong's location. However, at this moment, a young voice came into everyone's ears. Brother Wu Ming is fine. Mayu looked into the distance with eyes full of trust. Although everyone was baffled by the fact that she was Wu Ming's sister, Mayu's aura was indeed Wu Ming's. It couldn't be faked. Brother Wu Ming saved my world and Ilya's world. At the same time, he also saved me, Ilya, and Blackie. Brother Wu Ming saved everyone. This time, I believe that Brother Wu Ming will also save everyone. That was the trust between Mayu and Wu Ming. As soon as those words came out, everyone was no longer worried about Wu Ming. Even their fear of Tiamat was reduced a lot. Following this atmosphere, Merlin, who acted as a commentator, spoke again. The beast of original sin has appeared. The human's evil will lead to the appearance of the crowned servant. In addition, the appearance of one evil will lead to the birth of another evil. The crowned servant has already appeared. The next thing to be born is a new human's evil. Thus, to fight against the beast of original sin, Merlin's words were ethereal and deeply rooted in people's hearts. The entire Uruk seemed to have heard it, including Gadotsi and the others beside Merlin. In the next second, reflecting Merlin's words, the crowned servant has already appeared. A bell sounded out of thin air. Dang, dang, dang. Gadotsi and Matthew couldn't help but shiver. In the next second, an old man wearing a tattered linen and a hood stood in the middle of the crowd. Gadotsi and Matthew were shocked. Although the others were shocked by the old man's infiltration method, they didn't show anything because they were used to not showing their emotions. Obeying the will of heaven, the crown assassin, Hassan Sabah, give the opportunity to live from death. The old man's words were old, but full of confidence. Gadotsi, Matthew, and Roman and Leonardo da Vinci in Chaldea were all surprised. This old man was the first Hassan that Gadotsi and the others had asked to see at the Azrael temple. Come on, the evil that represents the opposite of the crown, the existence that has inherited the name of the beast, the apex of evil in the human fire worship sect, the three-headed demonic dragon, appear here. The entire sea of black mud was turbulent, and the source of the turbulence was near the coastline of the former Persian Gulf. In the next second, the turbulence increased, and Uruk City was affected as if there was an earthquake. Then, a huge pure white figure leaped out of the sea of black mud, hovered in the sky a few times, and dispelled part of the black clouds before landing on the sea of black mud. It was a behemoth that was not inferior to Tiamat, but its color was completely opposite to the dark Tiamat. This behemoth was pure white. Like Tiamat, it was like a beast with 4 limbs on the ground and a pair of folded gray wings on its back. In addition, this pure white behemoth had 3 heads, with a pair of dragon horns on the middle head, a crown on the left head, and nothing on the right head. It seemed lifeless as its head drooped. In addition, the pure white behemoth was holding 2 demonic beasts that were larger than humans in size. They were Musu Maf and Kuru, who had escaped. The black beast and the pure white beast stood opposite each other with their eyes closed, as if waiting for an opportunity. That is... In response to Gadotsi's question, Merlin, as the commentator, continued to speak. One of the evil points in the Persian fire worship sect's mythology, the 3-headed demonic dragon that once destroyed half of the world, Hazi Dahaka, has now appeared as another human evil beast. Gadotsi and Matthew were shocked. However, Ishtar, who had almost recovered, noticed a clue. She realized that she had seen the 3-headed demonic dragon's middle head before. Wait, is this 3-headed demonic dragon transformed by Hyunryong? Hey? Gadotsi and Matthew looked at Ishtar in disbelief. Look, the 3-headed demonic dragon's middle head is basically the same as the head of Hyunryong's dragon body, isn't it? Everyone looked at the place where Ishtar pointed. Gadotsi, Matthew, Quizzard, Leopard Man, and Anna had never seen Wuming's dragon body, so they were not sure. However, Gilgamesh and Nawakamura definitely knew. When Wuming transformed into his dragon body and fought with Gorgon, although they were still far away, Nawakamura, as a servant, must have some impression of it. However, the only ones who knew the most were Merlin, the cheater, and Enkidu and Funbaba, who had always been by Wuming's side. Immediately, Enkidu spoke. That's right. That human evil is indeed Hyunryong, Sama's transformation. It was summoned by Crown Assassin and another human evil. Human evils were attracted to each other. When a human evil appeared, other human evils would appear in turn. This was destined, and Crown Servant, as the suppression mechanism of human evils, would naturally appear together with human evils. In other words, where human evils appeared, there must be Crown Servant, and where Crown Servant appeared, there must be human evils. However, This became a contradiction. In the end, did the crowned servant appear first? Or did the beast appear first? Wuming relied on Crown Assassin and the double primer to successfully appear as a crowned servant. And as the carrier, naturally, was the three-headed demonic dragon Az Dakaha's body that Wuming obtained from the box world. Chapter 1028. Back then, when Wuming inherited Az Dakaha's human final trial identity in the box and returned to the root, Wuming suddenly had the idea of transferring the human final trial identity to Az Dakaha's body. It was not to revive Az Dakaha, but to reconstruct a new body based on Az Dakaha's body to act as the human final trial's absolute evil. When Wuming entered the Mesopotamia singularity, his spiritual base was forged from Az Dakaha's body. Kalas continued to perfect and refine the concept of a human final trial in the root, adding the concept of the human final trial identity to Wuming's spiritual base created by Az Dakaha. However, later on, after realizing that the enemy was the human evil, Wuming had a new idea: to use the human evil's identity to appear. Merlin also said that the human evil and the crowned servant were attracted to each other. If one existed, the other would exist. Likewise, the human evil and the human evil would also attract each other. If one existed, the other would also appear. This was an unbreakable rule. The human final trial identity was similar to the human evil identity itself. Furthermore, Az Dakaha belonged to Persian mythology, and Persia was a part of Mesopotamia. Therefore, with the crowned servant assassin and the other human evil as the primer, and with the suppression force behind Wuming giving him some face, the new human evil, Beast 7 Az Dakaha, was naturally born. The human evil seventh beast is Lord Hyunryong's trump card. Because this human evil was controlled by Wuming, although it was harmful to humans, Wuming would not actively harm humans. He would leave the Type Moon world after eliminating the other human evil, Tiamat, so he would not harm humans. It was even possible that after he left, the human evil would automatically leave him and return to the real Beast 7. That's right, the human evil was transformed from the love of the 7 humans. Wuming was only temporarily using a series of methods to appear as the 7th beast, but he did not truly become the human evil. However, if the human evil that inherited the 7th beast remained in the Type Moon world, it would be qualified to become the new beast and replace the original 7th beast. After all, the scene that Az Dakaha, who inherited the final trial's absolute evil, most wanted to see was the human hero standing on its corpse and advancing towards a better future. In a sense, this was also considered love. After all, the human final trial's absolute evil in the Type Moon world was an evil that humans had to overcome. It was fully qualified to do so. The human evil against the human evil. This is Hyunryong's trump card. Merlin said the final words. Now, the battle of the beasts that only exists in fantasy is about to begin. Following Merlin's words, Enkidu, who was originally carrying Finbaba, put down Finbaba and flew into the sky. It turned into a dazzling silver chain and flew towards the pure white, three-headed demonic dragon, wrapping around its drooping head. In the next second, the three-headed demonic dragon's 3 heads opened their eyes at the same time. Red pupils, and blue pupils appeared in the eyes of the 3 heads respectively. Trinity, Gilgamesh saw the 3-headed demonic dragon's current state. The 3 heads were occupied by 3 different spiritual bases. One of them was Wuming's, another was Enkidu's, and the last one seemed to be Wuming's magic attire. It's rare to see a magic attire with a spiritual base alone, Zhuge Kongming commented. Then, as the 3-headed demonic dragon opened its eyes, Tiamat on the opposite side also opened her eyes, revealing a pair of shining starry eyes. Roar! The 3-headed demonic dragon roared like an ordinary beast. Hey! Tiamat let out a mournful cry that sounded like a song. The 2 giant beasts let out their own roars, and then the battle began. After the roar ended, the pure white giant beast casually swallowed Musumafu and Kuru, as if it was demonstrating its power. Hey! The pitch-black giant beast expressed its anger. Its roar contained a powerful magical power, and the sea of black mud was forcefully split apart by this magical power. However, the pure white giant beast wasn't affected by this roar at all. It spread the curled shadow wings on its back. The shadow wings covered the sky and were so huge that they were bigger than the pure white giant beast's body. With the help of the shadow wings, the pure white giant beast flew into the sky. Its mouth contained a white light that could destroy the world, and it suddenly shot it toward the pitch-black giant beast. Dawn! The tyrant's halo hit Tiamat, and the white light covered everything in the surroundings. It even covered the solar almanac that had long disappeared, and it lit up the sky and the earth. In an instant, it was as bright as day. The Uruk city was very far away from the place where the two giant beasts were fighting. Moreover, the Uruk was protected by Wuming's relic, so the battle between the two giant beasts wouldn't affect the Uruk at all. Although they didn't know what was going on outside, they still followed Gilgamesh's orders. The humans were still praying in their homes, and they didn't care about what was going on outside. They just prayed that the end of the world would be over as soon as possible. On the city wall in the southwest of Uruk, everyone covered their eyes. There was no other reason, as the light was too glaring, and they couldn't see what was going on clearly. However, in the end, everyone walked down the city wall. After all, they couldn't just close their eyes and stare blankly. However, at that moment, everyone understood that the battle between the two giant beasts was not something that they could intervene in. If Quizzard wasn't a servant but a god, she could still intervene. However, no matter if it was a servant or a body, they couldn't intervene, including Ishtar. Damn it, Hyunryong, if you lose, I won't forgive you, Ishtar muttered, because she couldn't do anything. God bless, Master Hyunryong, you must win. Ishtar glanced at it, and it turned out that her demigod, Ereshkigal, was praying to the god. Hey, are you a god yourself? Ishtar couldn't help but complain. I'm willing, can't I? Ereshkigal blushed and stared back at Ishtar. Although the two were half-sisters, they didn't get along well. However, to Ereshkigal's surprise, Ishtar didn't refute Ereshkigal. Instead, she comforted her. Don't worry, Hyunryong won't lose. He saved the Uruk. We just need to believe and wait. Although Ishtar's gentleness was somewhat uncomfortable, Ereshkigal felt good. She remembered what Wuming said at the beginning. It seemed that Wuming didn't lie. Ishtar was actually a good goddess. While Ereshkigal was stunned, Gilgamesh suddenly spoke. Finbaba, with your strength, you should be able to help. Gilgamesh stood in front of Finbaba, who was rubbing her eyes, and said so. Master told me to stay here, Finbaba said in a childish voice. Gilgamesh raised his eyebrows, but then Gilgamesh realized why Wuming asked Finbaba to stay here. So that's how it is, you're also a crown. Gadotsi and Matthew were surprised. Roman and Leonardo da Vinci of Chaldea were also surprised. Why does it seem like a crown is cheap? Two human evils naturally need two crowned servants. Hyunryong, just let Finbaba temporarily accept the identity of the crown rider to maintain the situation of two human evils. Once Finbaba uses her power, the power of the crown rider will be lost. In short, he used the contradiction between crowned servants and human evils. The first thing to know was that there was no rule that the number of human evils needed to be the same number of crowned servants. Originally, the crown assassin appeared because of Beast 2, but the crown assassin was used by Wuming to pair with his own Beast 7. As a result, the second beast lost its corresponding crowned servant. As a result, there must be another crowned servant to maintain the balance. Wuming must maintain this state so that the contradiction will not be broken and he can continue to exist. At this moment, Wuming was not the real Beast 7. He could only use this method to make himself appear. Hearing Merlin's clear and logical analysis, everyone was enlightened. However, there was something that Merlin didn't understand. Merlin could understand why the first Hassan cooperated with Wuming's action. After all, the two had met before. But what about Finbaba? She was neither a servant nor a human. How could she take on the title of rider? The reason was that the suppression force was Wu Ming's backer. He temporarily put the title of rider on Funbaba without the slightest pressure. Wu Ming paid the price anyway. During the acceptance of the title, Funbaba couldn't use her power. However, Merlin would never know the answer. Chapter 1029. Outside Gadatsi and the others, the white light that was capable of destroying the world gradually weakened until it disappeared. If Gadatsi and the others came out to take a look, they would be shocked beyond words. This was because the black mud that originally covered the ground had completely disappeared after the white light dissipated. No, it didn't disappear. It had been destroyed by the white light that had destroyed a third of the world. The hegemon's halo, Karina, contained an inheritance that could destroy a third of the world. It was known as the strongest gift of the Flash faction in the Box Garden world, and could be said to be AZ Dakaha's proudest move. This was because this move was the manifestation of the three-headed dragon's inheritance that had destroyed a third of the world. It was a move that completely belonged to AZ Dakaha. Unfortunately, Wu Ming's spiritual base had fused with AZ Dakaha's body. This move that he was so proud of also belonged to Wu Ming. Wu Ming had used the ability to destroy a third of the world to choose to destroy the black mud that had covered half of Mesopotamia. Logically speaking, even the hegemon's halo shouldn't be able to destroy half of the black mud in one go. However, this was the black mud of the origin. Wu Ming only needed to add the power of origin to the hegemon's halo, and it was like a hot knife cutting through butter. It was very easy to destroy the black mud that had come ashore. Even the black clouds in the sky dissipated, revealing the sun in the west. The long period of black clouds caused people's perception of time to become blurry. Even day and night were somewhat blurred. For example, when the solar ephemeris acted as the sun to reflect Tiamat's figure, Gadatsi and the others thought that it was night. Wu Ming was also one of the people who had such a misunderstanding. Is the day almost over? The three-headed dragon's head with large dragon horns looked at the sun that had already moved to the west and sighed. This head belonged to Wu Ming. He hadn't done anything, but he realized that more than half the time had passed. Looks like tonight is going to be a sleepless night. Wu Ming, who was flying in the sky, looked down again. Because Wu Ming had removed the black mud that surged onto the land, the seawater observatory along the Persian Gulf coast reappeared. However, the lighthouse-like observatory had been broken down in the middle, and the collapsed part was nowhere to be seen. No longer paying attention to the collapsed observatory, Wu Ming landed on the coast of the Persian Gulf and folded his wings. The black mud on the land had indeed been cleared away by Wu Ming, but the black mud in the sea was not reduced at all. At this moment, from the Persian Gulf to the Indian Ocean in the distance, the sea surface was pitch black and looked quite muddy. There was basically no seawater, only black mud. After all, the tyrant's halo had destroyed one-third of the world. Wu Ming's ability to wipe out half of the black mud on the continent was already a rare effect. As for wiping out the entire ocean of black mud, sorry, Wu Ming was temporarily unable to do so. This was because the entire Persian Gulf and the Indian Ocean connected to it had turned into black mud, and the Indian Ocean could even be called the Black Mud Ocean. As for Tiamat, she was not dead anyway. She was probably thrown into the sea of black mud by Wu Ming's halo. Just as Wu Ming was vigilant, a melodious sound wave came from the sea. The three-headed dragon immediately spread its shadow wings, including itself, to block the sound wave. It suddenly spread its wings, and the shadow wings instantly dispersed the sound wave. Master, in the myths, Tiamat didn't have many special abilities, but she was quite good at spirit of speech. The head on the left of the three-headed dragon with a crown suddenly spoke. This was the head controlled by Kalis. Mother is the mother goddess of creation. She doesn't need or have many abilities. Her body is her strongest weapon. This time, it was the head on the right of the three-headed dragon that spoke. This was the head controlled by Enkidu. Indeed, with her huge dragon body, just a casual attack from her, is filled with power. In addition to her almost unbeatable authority, she doesn't need any extra power at all. Wuming nodded. The so-called power didn't refer to having fancy abilities, but to being able to defeat the opponent no matter how many or how strong their abilities were. Wuming was almost the same as Tiamat. Ever since Wuming found out that he was the origin dragon, he didn't put much effort into pursuing power, because the key to his power was the power of the origin dragon and the powerful body of the origin dragon. It was apparent that Tiamat was the same. Her body was her best weapon. Not only that, but Tiamat also had some terrifying abilities. For example, her authority, the Sea of Life. The Sea of Life had a cell-level force conversion effect called Aminogeas. It could turn any creature that came into contact with or entered her Sea of Life into one of their own. Mizusobo Benkei had fallen for this trick. This ability existed before the Black Origin Mud and Tiamat fused. After fusing with the Black Origin Mud, this ability was only strengthened, although it was a little too much. At this moment, the Persian Gulf and the entire Indian Ocean were Tiamat's Sea of Life. Wuming couldn't kill her in the Sea of Life. To give a less precise example, could you die of a common cold while receiving treatment in a famous provincial hospital? Although it was too absolute to say that it was 100%, it was indeed impossible to die from a cold under such conditions. After the song was broken by Wuming, the sea of Black Origin Mud began to stir again. Then masses of Black Origin Mud surged and condensed, forming a huge body. This was exactly the same as Tiamat's dragon body, but the size was completely different. This time, Tiamat's body was obviously bigger than before. This meant that Tiamat's body was bigger than the three-headed demonic dragon at the moment. Is the entire Sea of Life Tiamat's body? If Wuming was still guessing before, his parents were now certain of it. It seemed that the space that Gadatsi and the others brought with them was indeed inside Tiamat's body. However, why didn't Tiamat attack Gadatsi and the others? Instead, Ishtar only began to move after she blasted a hole into space. Was Tiamat still asleep? Or was there some other reason? This is troublesome. Wuming realized that he couldn't defeat Tiamat. However, Tiamat shouldn't be able to defeat the three-headed demonic dragon either. Hey! Tiamat opened her huge mouth. The sound wave that was full of magic struck again, and this time, it was more powerful than the last time. Wuming dared to say that even if Matthew activated his noble phantasm, he might not be able to block this attack. It was enough to show how powerful the sound wave was. However, it was still useless against the three-headed demonic dragon. At this moment, the three-headed demonic dragon was a powerful existence driven by the fusion of Wuming, Kalas, and Enkidu's spiritual base. Kalas aside, Wuming's spiritual base was the best among the servants, and Enkidu's real body was even more powerful. Together with Kalas, the three of them became a trinity. The three-headed demonic dragon that bore the name of fire worship sect's evil dragon, Az Dahaka, was already in existence that no servant could match. No, it should be said that the three-headed demonic dragon at this moment was not an existence that could be defeated simply by having powerful strength. After all, the three-headed demonic dragon's current identity was a human evil, and defeating a human evil often required not only strength, but also wisdom, human wisdom. Both sides were human evil, so neither side could do anything to the other. However, Wuming still had the upper hand at the moment. After all, he was once a human, and the three-headed demonic dragon was a trinity existence. At this moment, Tiamat was facing three existences, which was 3 against 1. That was the advantage that Tiamat did not have. Master, I detected a powerful binding on Goddess Tiamat's body. Binding? Yes, and it seems that Tiamat added the binding herself. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.